are possibly saying that within the next day or two, we could see this develop into our first tropical depression of 2008. So this is the area of low pressure that we are watching centered in Central America. Now, as of now, once again, the coordinates is that it's still about 200 miles off the coast of Costa Rica. It is still slow developing into what we are thinking is going to be a tropical depression within the next day or two. It is still going to carry heavy rain towards Panama, Costa Rica, and Nicaragua. Once again, that 50-50 chance, well, we're seeing about 80-20 now, just because, once again, the latest update, the National Hurricane Center has sent out an advisory saying that within the next day or two, it could become the first tropical depression of 2008. Now, for us back home,
possibility of development over the Pacific Ocean in the next 24 to 48 hours. Some of the computer models say that this could hop over Central America, some heavy rain, Honduras and Nicaragua, and reform in the Caribbean Sea. What it means beyond this weekend or so remains to be seen.
America here around Managua, Nicaragua, we have Tropical Depression 1E with winds of 30 miles per hour, moving very slowly to the north, really just drifting at about 3 miles per hour. That central pressure at about 1,003 millibars. If this gets upgraded to a tropical storm, it would be Alma. But already the impacts being felt because this is so close to the coast here. You can see Costa Rica getting some heavy rain. Here's Nicaragua going to be looking at some heavier rain lifting up through this region as well. So
Centroamérica entre 10, 15 y hasta 20 pulgadas de precipitaciones, todo cortesía de la tormenta tropical Alma, la primera de la cuenca del Pacífico para este año 2008, con viento máximo de 45 millas por hora, desplazándose rumbo norte a razón de 6, pudiera estar tocando tierra tan pronto como para las horas de la noche de hoy en la costa de Nicaragua, desplazándose hacia sectores del Salvador y Guatemala y hasta Honduras, donde pudiera continuar dejando bastantes lluvias. Este sistema puede una vez más alcanzar el oeste del Caribe y ahí se formaría una baja presión que traería la posibilidad de algunas lluvias para nosotros para el próximo fin de semana, pero estamos hablando con mucha distancia o muy anticipadamente. Eso pudiera suceder, no es que va a suceder.
Storm Alma battering Central America. The very latest advisory suggesting that the center of circulation is practically half onshore, half over water, so that has kept it from intensifying any, but you can still see those feeder bands coming across northeastern Nicaragua with plenty of heavy rainfall. Here are the very latest numbers. Still 65-mile-per-hour winds, 12.4 north, 87.0 west, moving north at 9, and now 50 miles west-northwest of Managua, which is that little red dot, but basically the system now over the city of León in the northwestern corridor of Nicaragua. Still plenty of rainfall over the entire region. It looks like it'll probably start to make a turn towards the northwest sometime on Friday as high pressure starts to build in across the Caribbean Sea. Let's take a look at what we can expect. There is Alma, and it looks like it will continue to head towards the north and west, but there is a little bit of moisture that's moving away from that system, and that could continue to move towards South Florida over the next couple of days. The big question is, when will it arrive here? And then also, adding a little fuel to all the moisture, there's a little weak wave making its way across Hispaniola. So again, it looks like sometime next week, plenty of chances for some rainfall across the area.
So not too much happening with it right now. Winds are sustained at 25 miles per hour, gusting up to 30. Will be dying out as it makes its way over portions of Belize and up into Mexico.
Mentioned that this is a very weak tropical storm, a minimal tropical storm, and really no changes as of 6 o'clock. Let's take a look at Arthur. There it is right there. It's actually over land right now, 777 miles well to our southwest. Winds remain at 40 miles per hour, moving to the west, so it's not moving in our direction at 7 miles per hour. Now, a couple of strange things with this. Number one, it actually reformed into Tropical Storm Arthur this afternoon with most of the circulation over land. You don't see that too much. And also, this was the remnants of Tropical Storm Alma, which we had a couple of days ago in the Pacific. So once that died, and then it crossed into the Atlantic side, and then it regenerated today into tropical storm status once again, it changes the name And again, it changes the list as well. So that's why it went from Alma to Tropical Storm Arthur right now. Now let's zoom in and show you where it is. You see the circulation right in here, and the actual center of circulation is just north of Belize and the southern areas of Mexico, right about in there. Again, extremely weak. And there's the forecast track. The Hurricane Center thinks it's going to be downgraded by tomorrow morning to a tropical depression as it moves straight off towards the west. This is primarily just a rainstorm for areas of Central America, and then it should move into the Bay of Campeche. It shouldn't strengthen, and then into southern Mexico sometime on Tuesday into Wednesday.
And it's hard to even spot the center at this point because it's getting pretty beat up by the terrain. And of course, as a tropical storm or hurricane moves out of the water, it really loses its life source and its fuel, so it starts to break down. So hopefully this thing will die out over the next day or so, or day or two, and those folks will get some relief. In the meantime, they're going to get copious amounts of rain, so they may as well get ready for the deluge. Unfortunately, the infrastructure there isn't the greatest, so this could be a really, really dangerous situation for folks down there. Well, as of 5 a.m., if you're tracking our system, it was at 18.3 north, 90.1 west, maximum sustained winds of 40 miles per hour direction, moving west at 7. So it's a slow mover that will allow it to dump a lot of rain, unfortunately, as I was just telling you. And the pressure is 1006 millibars. It's 115 miles southeast of Campeche, Mexico, and it is our first named system of the 2008 Atlantic hurricane season. So you can see by tomorrow it should be down to an area of low pressure. Let's hope that happens before, because that would be better for the folks.
South Florida, the 11 o'clock advisory on Tropical Depression Arthur. This system is a sopping wet system that will dump perhaps 2 feet of rain on Central America, with a major loss of life expected because of the mountainous terrains there. This is a dangerous and deadly situation, even though the system is weakening out. Top winds are only 30 miles an hour. Currently on the border of Guatemala and Mexico, you can see on the infrared satellite imagery copious amounts of rain there, and the National Hurricane Center says that system could sit there for another 3 days, dumping at least 10 to 15 inches more rain on Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and all those nearby areas.
Season started yesterday, and our first system of the Atlantic hurricane season, Arthur, fortunately is dissipating. The final advisory was issued yesterday. It's located over Belize, headed towards the Yucatan Peninsula.
And welcome back. It's time now for your tropical update, and we are in hurricane season here on the Atlantic Basin. And fortunately, everything appears to be quiet. So if you have your honeymoon planned and you're heading off to Jamaica, oh, it sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Well, things are going to be very nice. We're not looking for any type of development anytime soon. There's a look at the Atlantic. Now, you do notice a flare-up of thunderstorms right here across Hispaniola. We've seen some of that in Haiti and Dominican Republic, San Juan and Puerto Rico also getting storms, but it's not developing. It's really just a tropical wave that has moved through here, and it's interacting with some stronger winds. So we'd see the flare up of thunderstorms, and it could be causing some very heavy rain, and so we could be dealing with some flash flooding. So that's an issue that we're going to have to be studying very carefully. Outside of that, though, fairly tranquil as we head through the nighttime hours throughout the Caribbean and here in the Gulf of Mexico. A few of those thunderstorms moving on off the Gulf, but we're looking at no development across the area, so that's great. As we head on down to the Bahamas, boy, it's going to be crystal clear here tonight and tomorrow. Maybe an afternoon thunderstorm, but you know, you just plan your trip into the casino just right, huh? And then you're going to be fine. As we head out to the Antilles, we're also looking good, and you can see a little bit more on how those thunderstorms blew up over Puerto Rico. Heading off to Mexico, we're also looking pretty tranquil. Cancun, no problems. Acapulco, also seeing really rain-free skies at this hour, so you couldn't ask for any better.
Tomorrow we're going to get another chance for some moisture coming in out of the Gulf of Mexico. The rest of the Atlantic is looking mighty quiet. You can see that it's clear. This is all due to high pressure, but very close to the equator, we are following 5 tropical waves, and they are all very weak except for one, and that's this one right here. This is the only one that's worth watching. You can see that it's a huge cluster of clouds. There is some low-level circulation. We checked in with the National Hurricane Center. This is what they had to say. This is a strong wave. It is moving towards the west. There is the potential for some slow development, but right now the chances of this turning into anything less than 20%.
For Dr. Steve Lyons. And Steve, we're still watching something coming off the African coast, a wave. And the next name in the Atlantic line would be Bertha. And Bertha and waves off of Africa in July have a lot to do with what's going on, I guess, what has happened in history.
That's right. 1996, Bertha formed off of Africa, very close to African coast, and moved all the way toward the United States coastline and made landfall as a Category 2 in North Carolina. That was back in '96. Now, what do we have going on here? We've got a wave that you can see moved off the African coast. It's now going to pass south of the Cape Verde Islands over the next 24 hours. Thunderstorms are co-located with it. Now, don't get too worried about this because it's a long way away. You can see basically here's the African coast here. There's the low pressure center now that's moved off. There's thunderstorms co-located with it. So this could become a tropical depression fairly quickly, but it's got a long way to go to reach the United States coastline if it goes on the right track. And typically these have a tendency to move more toward the northwest into the central Atlantic. So we'll monitor this. Typical time track for this to get all the way across is anywhere from about 8 days to 12 days, depending on where it would actually go. The closest approach, of course, is South Florida, time-wise. We're not saying it's going to go there by any means. All right, let's get closer to home and what's going on right now in the near term. And across the Caribbean, upper-level west winds, you can see them streaming across all the way through the Antilles, unfavorable for anything tropical to develop, so anything coming this way is going to have to interact with those west winds. And the same west winds are even faster in the Gulf of Mexico, still causing some thunderstorms over the Florida Peninsula. That'll happen again tomorrow with the surface heating, and some clouds over most of the northern Bahamas, but nothing that's going to ruin your vacation there, as the winds in the Gulf of Mexico are very light at the surface, even though they're roaring at about 50 miles per hour.
To take a cruise, how are we looking out there? As we look across the Atlantic, there's two areas I'm going to touch on. One is over by Barbados, the other is off the coast of Africa. And looking at the quick scan satellite imagery earlier today and such, it looked like we had a pretty formidable circulation right down at the surface here. And the convection, the deep convection, those are the heavy showers and storms near the center circulation here. They quieted down for a while, but it appears that they're starting to redevelop near where that surface low would be, over toward just to the south-southeast of the Cape Verde Islands a little ways. This one here, even if it does develop at all, it's likely to be pulled out toward areas of the central Atlantic. That's what the forecast suggests. So we're not too concerned about that, even if it does become a depression and eventually a storm. So right now, sort of marginal, hasn't changed a whole lot, holding on to some convection near the center. All right, let's work our way closer to home from this low pressure here over toward the Caribbean Sea, Gulf of Mexico, and you can see what's happening here.
Morning again, right off the top, trouble in the tropics.
Tropical Depression 2 forming in the Atlantic early this morning. Let's bring in 7's Julie Durda. She's got the details. Julie.
Well, good morning, Richard, and good morning, South Florida. Here are the latest details on Tropical Depression 2. As of 5 o'clock this morning, the National Hurricane Center has sent out the notice of 35-mile-per-hour winds. The pressure is at 1008 millibars. We have the latitude of 12.6 north, longitude at 22.7 to the west. It's moving to the west-northwest, very slow at 9 miles per hour. It is located 250 miles southeast of Cape Verde Islands. Now let me show you what's going on with this system. In the last 24 hours, it has really started to pick up its punch, basically with its counterclockwise flow. We're seeing that deep convection really coming together here on our satellite. It is once again just off the coast of Africa. Now you can see as it's moving up towards the west-northwest, we have the forecasting cone showing that it could possibly become a tropical storm by later on tonight and even tomorrow morning. And if it does so, it would be named Bertha. We'll be watching that as well as it's staying organized and expecting to strength. It will tie into a ridge of high pressure that's in the Atlantic waters, and that's basically what we're forecasting.
Tropics. We have the second tropical system of the year so far that just developed this morning off of Africa. You can see it right there. It's Tropical Storm Bertha. It's not particularly strong yet. Winds are right around 40 miles an hour. It's about 3,700 miles to the east-southeast of Miami, so it is very far out there in the Atlantic. And right now, it's moving at a pretty good pace, west-northwest, at around 14 miles an hour. Here's the official forecast track from the National Hurricane Center, and you can see that it very gradually moves its way to the west-northwest. But over the next 5 days, it's not going to be anywhere near land. And towards the 3 to 5 day stretch, the National Hurricane Center does hook it a little bit more to the north, and hopefully that will end up being the case and it will stay out in the Atlantic. But we have a lot of time to watch this.
Big Ed, if you look at really the month of July, break it down into thirds. The first 10 days of the month of July, usually we'll find a storm form about once every about 5 years. Well, this is one of those 5 years. We have Bertha right here. Bertha over toward the Cape Verde Islands, also interesting feature in toward areas of the eastern Caribbean Sea. One thing at a time. Let's go over toward Bertha, give you the latest on that. And Bertha has the latest information, 45 miles an hour. So it has strengthened just a touch. If you look at the picture here, you can tell something's happening. You can see the outflow spinning outward here. What is going to happen here is that we have a trough in the mid part of the Atlantic here. Usually is sitting through this part of the world this time of year. So what is going to happen? We got this trough. This is an upper air trough swinging eastward. It just depends on the exact intensity of it. If it's a little bit weaker, well, our Bertha may take a little more to the southerly course here. But if it's stronger, it will yank it farther to the north faster. Also, we have to be concerned about the exact strength of Bertha. The weaker Bertha is, the better chance it's going to follow more of the low-level wind flow around the Azores high here. So we are just going to watch it right now. It's a pretty deep system now, a lot of deep convection with it. So we're thinking the better chance would be probably in the middle of the road or up on that northern half of the strip there. Okay, over toward the Caribbean Sea as well as
a bit stronger this afternoon with 50-mile-per-hour winds. One of the biggest changes is it continues to accelerate in speed, now moving west-northwest at 18 miles per hour. There's also been a slight change to the future track and risk area from the National Hurricane Center. Notice that as we go through the weekend and into Monday, it's moving just about due west, and then a slight turn to the northwest as we go into Tuesday and Wednesday, but not as sharp as indicated before. So as we get into the middle of next week, right now, the best indication is that Bertha would be located somewhere between or just south of Bermuda to just north and east of the Lesser Antilles or northeast of Puerto Rico in this general area here. But as you can still see, even by the middle of next week, it is a good deal away from South Florida, and it is way too early to make any kind of speculation on what, if any, effect it would have on us, and much less the east coast of the United States. Okay, more on Bertha's intensity coming up in a few minutes.
Hey, as we look around the Atlantic waters, we have a tropical storm out there. It's Bertha, well out toward the coast of Africa. Actually, it's a little ways to the southwest of Cape Verde Islands. If you take the first 10 days of the month of July, about once in every 5 years, you'll find a tropical cyclone developing. And hey, this is the year. Let's look more closely over toward Bertha, see what's happening here. Our latest advisory from the Hurricane Center puts the top sustained winds up around 50. And if you look at this here, maybe some of those showers and storms still trying to hold on that northern part of the circulation. It is certainly not well developed at this time with at least the thunderstorm cluster, but it is possible that it could gain a little strength as it continues heading its way over through the open waters of the Atlantic. And it all really just depends exactly how organized it is on what the exact direction it's going to go. We think it will move basically off to the west-northwest here for several days, and eventually it will be picked up by a pretty permanent trough high in the atmosphere through the mid-Atlantic. And what that will allow to do, it'll make its way more of the northerly part of the course here if it is stronger. That's because with the clouds building all the way up through the higher parts of the atmosphere, it's affected by more of the upper air winds. But if it weakens, it will be carried more by the low-level flow, which would take it on the southern edge of the course. So for interest, probably up toward Bermuda. You want to keep an eye on this one anyhow.
Atlantic, and we're looking way out here. Here's the coast of Africa, and you can see this spin here. This is Tropical Storm Bertha. This is the second tropical storm of the Atlantic season. It has winds of about 50 miles per hour right now. The center of it not really all that well organized right now. It's moving over some slightly cooler waters, so it's not intensifying right now. Winds of 50 miles per hour, but it's moving very quickly towards the west-northwest at about 21 miles per hour to 750 miles west of the Cape Verde Islands. Now here's the projected path from the Hurricane Center, showing mainly a west-northwest track over the next few days, and by later on in the week, it could be between, say, Bermuda and the northern Caribbean. A lot of spread here in the computer model guidance. Some of the model guidance showing that it might turn northward into the Atlantic, and some of the guidance showing that it may just stay on this west-northwest track. Still a little bit too early to tell what's going to happen with that track, but we have plenty of time to watch that.
Storm in the eastern part of the Atlantic, generally heading westward over the next several days, we think. Here is the latest. As of the 5 p.m. advisory, winds still 50 miles an hour. It is moving along towards the west at 21 miles an hour. Pretty good clip, and it should continue in that general direction over the next few days. Now, here's a look at the satellite picture. There again, your stats.
It's not terribly well formed at this time. There's some cooler, more stable air around the system, and so it's going to take a little time for it to get going, but gradual strengthening is expected over the next few days. Conditions are expected to become more favorable as it continues along towards the west, and it looks like it could become a hurricane towards the next few days here, maybe about 3-4 days away from becoming a hurricane.
North, more on that in just a second, but really in terms of intensity right now, no changes over the last day. Here we are across South Florida. This is Bertha way out here. I got to tell you, it's still over about 2,600 miles away from us, and you can see the close-up of it spinning around right in there. And there's the central dense overcast. Here is the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center. As of 11 o'clock, you can see it's over 2,600 miles away. The winds remain at 50 miles per hour, and it's moving very quickly off to the west at 21 miles per hour. Here's the latest computer-generated track, courtesy of the National Hurricane Center. It's going to continue to move to the west, and then by Tuesday, notice how it turns more northwesterly because high pressure is going to be out here. So once it gets underneath the high, it's going to start going around the periphery. That's what the computer forecast models are thinking right now, and it should become a Category 1 hurricane. That's the latest thinking by Tuesday afternoon into Wednesday and Thursday. But let me get out of the way right here. You can see the projected track would take it off to our northeast, which would be good news for us. But again, we're going to have to continue to watch it.
Hurricane expert Dr. Steve Lyons, and Steve is tracking Bertha out there in the open waters of the Atlantic, pretty much behaving itself right now, going at that westward pace. Do you think that's going to change anytime soon?
Yeah, we think in about 2 or 3 days it'll take a little more northwest or west-northwest track, and at that time we think some further strengthening could occur. So as we look across the Atlantic, there it is out there. It's not looking too impressive on this broad scale picture, but a very persistent feature. We've been tracking this all the way from the East African country of Ethiopia. Now it's moving basically to the west at about 22 miles per hour. Here's the latest statistics on it as of 5 a.m. West 22, winds 50 miles per hour, pressure 1,000 millibars, that's estimated. But let's zoom in on it a little bit closer and we can see a couple of interesting features. First of all, notice the cluster of deep thunderstorms here, right about 17 degrees north. Now we put this into motion and we watch where those deep thunderstorms go, and they're just slightly north of where they were before. So every time it goes one of these long longitude lines, that's about 5 degrees. It's going north about 3/4 of a degree. We expect that trend to continue the next 24 to 36 hours, even beyond that time frame. Just a slight northward drift from due west until it comes north of the islands, and it turns to the north a little bit. It's going to catch some upper winds we think are a little more favorable. It could become a hurricane out in here and then move to the north. And at that time, it's going to slow down, we think. So it's running at 22, but it won't be running at 22 north of the islands. Now, the interesting thing is the stronger winds are on the north side. So if it comes close to the islands, maybe on the southern edge of our cone here, the islands are going to be in the weak sector, and we don't expect too much impact from that circulation.
Caribbean island, that moves in our general direction. Well, where is Bertha going to move? Here's the latest from our computer models, and some of the majority of the models now getting a better consensus. This latest run showing the majority taking it on that turn, curving toward Bermuda by about day 4 or 5. Still several factors in play here. Going around the base ridge of high pressure, that westerly flow, warm water and low shear may make for a hurricane by Tuesday, and then eventually it is expected to recurve with a weakness, steering winds taking it away from the United States. That would be a very good thing.
See, a little more symmetrical. You can see that spin right there in the last couple of frames. Still heading to the west, still very far away from us, but it could become a hurricane as early as tomorrow. It's entering some warmer waters, a little less wind shear. All of these ingredients helps these storms become a little better organized and also stronger. That's what's expected to happen over the next 24 hours. It's 18.6 north, 48.9 west. Maximum winds at 65 miles per hour, moving to the west-northwest at 20 miles per hour. Still more than 900 miles east of the Leeward Islands, so very far away from South Florida. We'll give you the full track coming up in your full forecast.
Story of the morning. It is the first hurricane of the Atlantic season. 7's Julie Dirt is in the Weather Center tracking Bertha. Julie?
That's correct, Christine. As of this morning, the latest advisory at 5 a.m., the National Hurricane Center has developed this as a hurricane, and it is our first hurricane for the Atlantic season. Take a look at Hurricane Bertha. It is over 2,000 miles away from us here in South Florida, but you can see that deep convection, that counterclockwise spin, still very strong conditions. And as of this morning, the winds are sustained at 75 miles per hour. The pressure has dropped to 987 millibars, latitude at 19.3 to the north, longitude 50.2 to the west. It is moving to the west-northwest at 17 miles per hour, and it is located right now 845 miles east of the Leeward Islands. Let's take a look at what the cone says. It is still sticking to its first figures as we first started this as a tropical storm. It is going to continue westward, and then as we see this broad area of high pressure in the Atlantic waters start to weaken, that's going to give a little gap for this Hurricane Bertha to make its way up more towards the north. Now, we won't see that development till the middle part or the end part of this week, so we'll be watching very closely for you.
The hurricane season here. It's not unheard of that we have a hurricane in July, but it's not all that common. Just want to show you the latest advisory. Of course, anytime there's a storm out across the Atlantic waters, you end up with everyone's attention right on it. And what we're going to look for is this system to continue to march off to the west and northwest. It's going to make the big turn. If we can get over the weather computer, I actually have a few more stats there for you. Winds are way up now to 90 miles per hour. Hurricane hunters are not going to investigate this storm right now, guys. We're going to let it go for another 24 hours, but eventually it'll make the turn. And this is what everyone wants to know. Is it going to come this way? And we think that enough influences will work on the system to turn it up to the north. Do you think perhaps Bermuda? We'll have to watch it very carefully, but at least folks in the Lesser Antilles and down towards the Bahamas and, of course, the east coast of the U.S. Breathing a little bit easier, seeing that there's a little more confidence it'll make the turn.
But Ryan, it's already a Category 2, though.
Exactly.
That was fairly quick,
that's
was it?
super fast. I thought it wasn't supposed to
it...
turn into Cat 1 until tomorrow
right,
or something.
Exactly. And intensity forecasting, as we've always talked about each season, is the most difficult parameter of anytime we get into tropical events, and still working on that, but we're going to keep an eye on it. We do have pretty good confidence that it will gradually turn off to the north and to the west.
A Category 1 to a Category 3 hurricane within hours. Bertha appears to be no threat to the United States.
But it is still impressive nonetheless. Let's get right to our Local 10 weather team. We begin tonight with meteorologist John Giraldi in for Trent Eric. What are we looking at tonight, John?
All right, guys, here's what's going on. Again, we are now dealing with a major hurricane, as you mentioned, a Category 3. Look at the winds. They've jumped up to 115 miles per hour with Hurricane Bertha, but it's still over 1,800 miles away. It's now moving to the west-northwest at about 12 miles per hour. We're going to go over to our hurricane specialist, Max Mayfield, and we're going to get the track of the storm. And also, Max, this is very, very unusual to have a major hurricane so early in July, right?
That's absolutely right, John. But we want to be real clear that this is definitely not a threat to South Florida. But let's look at the track here first. And it's moving west-northwestward, but it should gradually turn up more towards the north with time here. The Hurricane Center thinks it's peaked out here on the intensity as a Category 3 hurricane. Nearly all the computer models turn this hurricane to the north here. I think the biggest challenge with intensity forecasting is really going to be how close it gets to Bermuda. Now let's look at the infrared loop here and talk about intensity a little bit. You know, we didn't even have a hurricane until 5 a.m. this morning, and then even at 11 o'clock this morning, we still had a Category 1 hurricane. Now it's a solid Category 3. You can see the very distinct eye here, and that eye is very centrally embedded within that central dense overcast. And just another example of how the operational forecasters really need some help with intensity forecasting. Now, if you go out and look at the big picture, in about 3 days' time, it's going to be located somewhere right about here. And what we often see is a trough of low pressure, that will steer this out to the northeast. That's not going to happen in this case. In this case, when the hurricane gets to about in here somewhere, the high pressure system is going to be located over here to the east of it, and then that clockwise flow around the high is what's going to steer that up to the north. The steering currents will likely collapse a little bit here, so it will likely slow down some as it heads towards Bermuda. We'll be talking about this all week long. Lori?
All right, Max, thank you.
Any land areas in the middle of the Atlantic waters, the new advisory, keeping it a Category 3 hurricane, strength up to 120 miles per hour. This may be its peak intensity. It's looking healthy and nudging a little farther north. Coming up, the official forecast track.
Major hurricane of the 2008 Atlantic hurricane season. Of course, we're talking about Hurricane Bertha. Monday, we saw it grow in intensity. We've also seen just a little bit of change in the swath. And okay, here we go. This is the latest information right here. And you can see top sustained winds, wow, up to 120 miles per hour. considering what a day ago it wasn't even a hurricane. So yeah, it really deepened rapidly last night and during the day Monday. What we suspect, though, is that it probably maxed out. And looking at the satellite images all day, you know, I was a geek at home today, and I was like, oh, got to see the latest satellite picture here. And I was looking at the hurricane all day, and it looked like it almost maxed out late in the afternoon just by looking at the eye wall structure and the infrared coloration and such. So 120, I have a feeling that the next advisory from the Hurricane Center, especially if this trend continues, they may knock it down as we go into that 5 a.m. advisory. So you have something for us to keep our eyes on. All right, as we look at the swath, mentioned that there's maybe some slight change here. We still think, though, that it is going to curve east of Bermuda. Now, there is some uncertainty here in the sense that once we get out several more days, that the steering currents that are moving the hurricane probably will weaken, so there could be a bit of meandering or certainly slowing down of the speed.
All right, let's give you the very latest on our Category 3 storm out in the Atlantic right now. We're talking about Hurricane Bertha, which of course is just a little bit weaker than it was, at least on the satellite interpretation, than it was about this time yesterday. So here's the very latest with the storm, and as we zoom you in, you can see that it continues to move off to the northwest at 10. Winds still officially at 120 miles an hour, but would not be surprised to see that, Kim, maybe at the next advisory, those winds may be coming down just a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll have more on this at 10 minutes past, or 10 till the hour.
Category 2, so no longer a 3. That's the good news. And the other good news is, other than Bermuda, it probably will not impact any land masses. It's way out in the middle of the ocean, supposed to take that big, hard right turn and just keep on going out there. So hopefully we will not be hearing too much of Bertha as far as doing any damage to land masses. So that is the good news out of this. Amazingly, yesterday, this thing really just cranked up in intensity and dropped, I mean, to a Category 3 storm. So just amazing. In a short period of time, it went from a minimal storm to a major hurricane.
El huracán Bertha pues sigue degradándose en medio del Atlántico, está exactamente a mitad del Atlántico sin afectar ningún territorio. O sea, por el momento sigue en ese sector y ya los vientos sostenidos se han degradado a una velocidad de 105 a 110 millas por hora. En la mañana era un huracán categoría 3 con vientos sostenidos que sobrepasaban las 120 millas por hora. Bueno, las características de Bertha es que continuará degradándose a medida que avancen los días sin afectar ningún territorio, o sea, tierra. Así que por el momento Bertha está en la parte del Atlántico y por acá, por la parte de la cuenca del Pacífico, no vemos ningún tipo de perturbación, o sea, no hay ni tan siquiera formaciones de tormenta ni nada de eso. Dos ondas tropicales, una en México y Centroamérica y otra onda tropical en el Caribe.
Good news here. Hurricane Bertha is now a Category 2 hurricane. Wind speeds 105 miles per hour, so those winds have decreased. Moving towards the northwest, still at about 10 miles per hour. This is as of the 11 a.m. advisory, located 975 miles southeast of Bermuda, very far away from us and from the United States. But Bermuda is still on the edge of that forecast cone. Now, the Hurricane Center is saying that it'll continue to weaken to a Category 1 as early as tomorrow and will just continue to be downgraded because of the upper level winds and because of the cooler waters. It's expected to move over, and it's expected to move in a northwesterly, the northerly direction. So still have to watch this. Bermuda still could be in that path. All right, here's the latest satellite picture, and you can see the eye that was well defined yesterday and even earlier this morning. Right now, not the case, and even the western edge of the system right now is beginning to fade on out, just seeing more cloud coverage and convection because of the upper level winds. All right, in terms of
hurricane, not a Category 3 like last night. The 11 o'clock advisory now features 80-mile-per-hour winds. The position 840 miles southeast of Bermuda, moving to the northwest at 12 miles per hour. Here's what's going to happen with Bertha over the next 5 days. The new National Hurricane Center track forecast is nudged just a little bit to the west. So again, that still keeps a matter of concern for Bermuda over the next 3 to 5 days. And look where it is now, and look where it is Sunday. So it is only going to move very slowly to the northwest and north before eventually next week, most likely getting carried out to sea. But again, not a threat for South Florida. Let's go back to last night when we were showing you the Category 3 storm. You can see how well defined the eye of the hurricane was right there. But we go throughout the day today, the eye is no longer visible. The thunderstorms decreased, although tonight they seem to be picking up just a little bit, but no discernible eye, indicating that this hurricane is not as organized as it was 24 hours ago.
Out there. Visible satellite imagery from this morning shows the system trying to reform an eye at this point in the last few frames. Now remember, this is all via satellite data. Hurricane hunters aren't going to go out and investigate this storm. It continues to move off to the west-northwest. Out ahead of it, nothing doing. Dry air, which will again advance down into South Florida in the next few days as this system turns to the north. So we're not worried about Bertha for the east coast of the U.S., but rather just Bermuda here as we move down the line. 75-mile-per-hour winds with this system moving off to the west-northwest at 12. Might slow down its forward speed, and its movement may actually become a little erratic here in about 2 or 3 days. Now, the intensity, we may find this storm come up a bit, maybe to a strong Category 1, minimal Category 2 in the next few days. So a little uncertainty there, but we do know it will stay way off to our east. Now,
Hurricane regained Category 2 status. Our local 10 weather team is standing by with the very latest. Let's begin with Chief Meteorologist Trent Eric.
Yeah, Lori, this is the storm of two tales here. The other day we were talking about a major Category 3 storm. Last night down to a disorganized Category 1, and today showing signs of strengthening. Let's take you to the storm. Florida's behind my shoulder there. Bertha is still over 1,300 miles to our east, but you can see the satellite representation here a little bit better organized. But the latest advisory at 5 o'clock, indeed a Category 2 with winds of 105 miles per hour, gusting to 130. And right now the movement is northwest at 12. Here's the forecast track. National Hurricane Center indicates it may become a major hurricane in Category 3 once again. The good news is this storm will not affect South Florida, and it should pass safely to the east of Bermuda. However, they may start to impact some heavy swells here tonight or tomorrow morning by 2 o'clock on Monday, still a Category 1 storm. So if you look at Bertha here, we're going to bring in Max Mayfield now. Max, what has happened here in the last 12 to 24 hours to send Bertha through such a cycle?
Well, we're going to talk about that here. This sure demonstrates how difficult it is to forecast intensity. And if you remember this time yesterday, we had a weakening Category 1 hurricane. This afternoon, you can see the eye has developed and has become very, very distinct. And usually, the more distinct the eye and the more centrally embedded that is in that dense overcast, the stronger the hurricane is. And as you say, it's a Category 2 now, forecast to be a Category 3. One of the reasons is that the upper level outflow has really improved here. If you look at the water vapor, you can see there's the upper level low pressure system right there. There's another one out here to the northeast, and that is really helping the outflow pattern. It's over warm water, and the bottom started dropping out again, and it's still forecast to strengthen up to a Category 3 here in the next 24 hours or so. You can imagine if we were preparing for a Category 1 hurricane on land, and then by the time it made landfall, it became a Category 3. Luckily, Bertha is out of the middle of the Atlantic and not going to cause too much trouble there. But one of these days, that will happen at landfall. Let's just hope it's not here. Charles?
Strengthening. This time around, maybe a touch of strengthening late this afternoon into the evening. Now it appears it may have leveled off yet again. All right, here's the larger view. There is Bertha, and usually you have one of these hurricanes move north, the wind field starts to expand some as you head up toward the subtropics. There's Bermuda. Bermuda is the only land area that we're concerned about over this life cycle of this tropical cyclone. 11 p.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center, top sustained winds at 105. Of course, once you get up to 111, that takes us up to the Cat 3, and usually that's rounded up to 115. So that would be the first wind speed if it does make that, where it would once again regain that type of strength. Let's look at this right here, the structure of the eye wall. It's been sort of wobbling around today. Certainly it went under some pretty quick development again later today. If you watch closely here, the eye was pretty much centered in that CDO, we call it, central dense overcast. That's that circular area right around the hurricane where the eye is. Well, if you notice the last couple of shots here, it appears on that western side again, a little bit where it's getting eaten away. So maybe some of the winds aloft trying to push at it again, so it may not be quite as organized as it was earlier. So it's sort of wobbling around.
Hurricane Bertha delivering another twist to forecasters just when it appeared the storm was going to get stronger. The wind's getting weaker. Julie Bertha is tracking it for us from the 7 Weather Center. Julie?
Well, good afternoon, Christine, and good afternoon, South Florida. I mentioned this morning that you could already see the breakage and the shearing wind starting to dissipate the northern edge of this system. So as I zoom in, I want to show you what's been going on over the last hour or two. You can see with the water vapor map, basically this is starting to weaken because of the swell in the Atlantic waters as well as the shearing wind component. You can see most of the moisture, that heavy convection, is located in the greens that you're watching on our water vapor map. But as it continues to make its way up towards the north, you see that shear really breaking apart the system. It's starting to break apart into 3 different areas. So we'll be watching this very closely. And the latest statistics show it has weakened. It's now weakened down to a category 1. We see the wind sustained at 90 miles per hour. And then we have the pressure that has increased to 977 millibars. It is moving to the north and northwest at 9 miles per hour. It is now located 485 miles southeast of Bermuda. The track itself is still the same. They are anticipating this track to continue up more towards the north and still stay east of Bermuda, but Bermuda is still very close to this cone. So as you can see, the indentations of where the concerned areas may be are just on the outer layer of this cone. So we'll be watching this very closely. We still have the ridge of high pressure that is steering this whole system up towards the north.
Band of high cloud just kind of fanned out over the little island of Bermuda, which is about right there. All right, let's see what's going on here with this thing. We'll try and get into it. Here's the latest advisory as of 5 o'clock. 85 miles an hour moving northwest to 10, definitely down there in the category 1 range. Some of the gusts have been higher than that. So where's Bertha going to go from here? And that's really the big question. All right, and what we're going to see, especially in places like Bermuda, are inside the reef 3 to 5 foot waves, outside the reef 8 to 15 foot waves, regardless of where it goes. That's your marine forecast. But the trough across the Midwest that we're watching that's going to produce the severe weather tomorrow could drive east and just pick this thing up real easily. Okay, if it does this scenario, there's no question this thing will not only get picked up, but also potentially ripped apart. What I think is the more likely scenario is this trough, being July, is going to slide across and then lift north, leaving Bertha underneath the ridge. All right, and that could allow it to strengthen again before it eventually gets pulled on out. But guys, the interesting thing about this storm.
Hurricane Bertha is in, still spinning out in the Atlantic, still a Category 1 hurricane with maximum sustained winds remaining at 85 miles per hour near the center of that storm. It is slowing down, so its pass close to Bermuda is going to be delayed a little bit, perhaps as late as Sunday night or Monday morning. Notice the cone looks more like a balloon. That's because the forward speed of Bertha is really slowing down, moving only 8 miles an hour right now. That's the latest track right there with the 5-day risk area. Well out in the North Atlantic, but we'll watch it over the next couple days as it may impact Bermuda.
And then Bertha way out here, pretty close to Bermuda, about 200 miles to the southeast of Bermuda now. You can see it spinning here. It's not really moving all that quickly. It's moving into an area where the upper winds just aren't blowing a lot, and that's why Bertha really can't move a whole lot. It was moving towards the north. It's tried to get picked up by this trough of low pressure that moved to the north, but that is leaving now, and it's just kind of leaving Bertha sitting there behind. So this is going to sit here and spin over the next couple of days and slowly, very slowly move towards the north and eventually northeast. Right now moving towards the north-northwest, crawling at only 5 miles per hour, maximum winds 90 miles per hour, and it's about 225 miles to the southeast of Bermuda. Here's the forecast track from the National Hurricane Center showing the slow northward movement over the next couple of days. And by Thursday, yes, Thursday of next week, still in the Atlantic, may start to pick up speed towards the end of the week.
And it's blowing off of it a little bit, and because of that, Bill, it's weakened, and it's now a tropical storm, 70 miles per hour, which is good news for Bermuda. It's also going to be good news for the east coast of the United States as a wave action in some areas is going to be tapering down. There you see the circulation, and it looks like it might be moving south if you look at it just at a glance, but it's because the top of the cloud is moving to the south with the shear from the north coming down over the top of it. Its low-level circulation is almost stationary and will eventually track to the north, just to the east of Bermuda, we think. And you can see that. See the high cloud right there? That shadow is moving right over the center of the circulation. The top's basically blowing off, and that's what's caused the circulation to weaken to a storm. We don't think it's going to come back more than that. So basically what's going to happen for Bermuda, the wave action is going to be about 12 to 15 feet and dropping slowly as the system starts to weaken and shrink in size as well. The swells that have already been generated from it are going to continue to affect Cape Hatteras northward. South of there, they're going to be dropping quickly today. And they're going to affect all the way up to Maine about 4 to 7 feet over the next couple of days. So watch out for the dangerous rip current threat. But for Bermuda, the good news is even if the circulation takes the westernmost track and goes right over the top of them, you can expect some tropical storm winds. It's not going to really do too much for your well-built structures there.
Moment. And the storm, you know, has been fairly predictable for a lot of its life here. It's a very long-lived storm. Now, the longest-lived July named storm on record, gone on for more than a week now. Moving to the northwest at 2 miles an hour. It has really slowed down, 65-mile-an-hour wind, and it's pretty close to Bermuda, so there are going to be some impacts. You can see where it is right in here. Not a very well-formed storm. There's obviously a pretty well-defined circulation there, but there's drier air also being drawn into the system, and we think it's eventually going to make its move more towards the northwest than the north, probably just brushing the island of Bermuda, so there will be some wind, certainly a lot of very high surf on the south and east facing beaches, and then it should move off towards the northeast and eventually east and maybe even southeast.
Hurricane Center says is a high potential for development. This right here could become our next tropical depression as early as probably tomorrow. You can see it's a large cluster of thunderstorms. It's starting to show signs of a circulation right here, so this is certainly something we're going to want to watch. It's moving to the west right now at around 10 to 15 miles an hour, but again, it's 1,500 miles to the east of the Lesser Antilles. We have a long time to watch it. Bertha, we've been watching for a very long time. It really is losing steam. You can see really losing a lot of the bright oranges and bright reds. Winds right now 65 miles an hour. It is tropical storm strength. It is not a hurricane. Moving to the north-northwest at around 3 miles an hour. So it's moving towards Bermuda as we speak. Going to be moving towards the north and eventually probably taking a track a little further towards the east. Now,
and that's not the case for everybody, but tomorrow more of us will see rain than we saw today. And by the way, take a look at the situation over there in Bermuda with Tropical Storm Bertha. We'll bring it back home here in just a minute. Just want to let you know that this is the nearest the tropical storm force winds have been to Bermuda in about a week. They're just about 20 miles away now from getting about 60-mile-an-hour winds, so very, very close to Bermuda where that tropical storm warning continues in effect. The 11 o'clock advisory is now in. The current center is 160 miles southeast of Bermuda, but the tropical storm force winds extend out 140 miles. So you do the math, it's only 20 miles away, really. And the top winds at the center, 65 miles an hour, drifting north-northwest at 3 miles an hour. Still expecting a sharp right-hand turn, but after it goes past Bermuda tomorrow and Tuesday, so it looks like the island will be hit with a pretty vigorous tropical storm. At least it'll be very close there, but fortunately, we're not expecting a hurricane to return to that area. It should stay as tropical storm status. We are watching a newly developing system tonight. This just popped up today, about 1,500 miles east of the windwards. That could become TD3 or more sometime tomorrow. All right, let's take a look at where you can get
whatsoever. There is Tropical Storm Bertha, probably going to pass just to the east of Bermuda sometime later on this afternoon. They'll get some high winds, some surf, and some downpours, maybe 3 to 5 inches of rain. But other than that, the impact should not be that devastating at all. And you can look at the track. It should die somewhere out in the Atlantic sometime real soon after it takes its little brush with Bermuda. So that's the 11 a.m. advisory. Maximum sustained winds of 65 miles per hour, so still a tropical storm. Also watching another area of low pressure way out in the Atlantic, and hopefully that one will take a turn to the right as well and not give us any real problems. 6-day forecast.
This developing wave.
Okay, Trent, you can see that Bertha is still out here very near Bermuda. In fact, if we zoom in here, we can see the island itself is that little spot right there, and you can see the southwest eye wall has really gotten stronger on satellite. The aircraft has been out there during the day and found some strong winds, almost a hurricane strength there on that southwest side. We've got a radar animation here from Bermuda. The radar is actually located at the airport on the island right there. And you can see that southwest portion of the eye wall is actually going right over the island as we speak here. I wouldn't be surprised to see them get some hurricane force winds, or at least gust to hurricane force as that moves over them. They have a hurricane watch up now and the tropical storm warning. It's going to ease on out there to the north, eventually turn more northeastward, but it may even dive back down here to the southeast temporarily in response to another low coming in over the North Atlantic here. We also have another system, as Lori said here, we're watching down here in the tropics, about 1,150 miles east of the Caribbean. If we zoom in over this area, we can actually see that the upper level outflow is actually looks somewhat favorable for development. The water temperatures are very warm. It's very near depression stage here. You can see the circulation right in here. The only thing missing is deep thunderstorm activity near the center of that. So The Hurricane Center will be watching that tonight. There could start advisories here anytime. Charles, back to you.
This advisory is out. The storm finally is beginning to move away from Bermuda. And as we take the maps full, a 68-mile-per-hour wind gust earlier today, and more than 5 inches of rain has fallen on Bermuda. They didn't get a direct hit, but it was pretty close, with the worst of the storm right over top of the island as Bertha lifts off to the north and east. The hurricane watch has been discontinued, so good news there. We widened things out to show you pretty much the entire Atlantic Ocean, with a strong tropical wave down about 1,200 miles away from the islands. Folks, this is way too early to worry about anything, even for the Caribbean, but it could become Tropical Depression number 3 over the next couple of days. But you notice there, the colors, the colder cloud tops kind of going away tonight, things ebbing and flowing. And right now, the system is not very healthy at all.
Talking about here, I thought I'd start out with the big picture. We'll show you Bertha, which is moving farther away from Bermuda, so that's certainly some good news, and not really feeling the impact of Bertha anymore here along the east coast. Remember, we had the high surf and the dangerous rip currents. Well, the farther this gets away, the less of an impact it will have, so that's some good news. And we are going to continue to watch this wave as it works its way toward the Windward Islands. Now, before that happens, there's an area of shear here that could impact it somewhat, but this might be something worth watching. Another area that might be worth watching is here, where originally you saw a big blow-up of convection. Now it's about disappeared, but could easily flare up again. That's the same thing that's happened with this wave. So a few areas of interest out here as we continue our journey into the Atlantic Basin. Let's zoom in on Bertha. Winds now of 65 miles per hour, still a tropical storm. Possible this could reach briefly back up to hurricane status, although it's not moving in that direction right now. Pressure out here, and it's interesting to see how that will impact the movement of Bertha. As we watch the path, it's actually going to cause it to dive southeast and then come up and around that low. The gist of this, though, is that it will remain out to sea. This is not going to be something that's going to be impacting us, we don't think, at all. So this is definitely something. It's not going to be impacting any landmass.
From Mexico, the Caribbean Sea looking pretty quiet. One wave that's diminishing there. Otherwise, across the Atlantic, there are a few little bursts of thunderstorms with a few weak waves. One here, another, and another coming off of Africa. Nothing even hinting at developing. This had been the main candidate we were watching, and right now it's encountering some wind shear and dry air ahead of it, and just something we'll continue to watch for you. And by the way, speaking of the tropics, you can keep up to date with the latest.
Move away from the islands of Bermuda. However, the surf is still pretty bad, especially on the north and northeast coast. So for vacationers there, we still need to avoid getting in the water, really more than knee depth here, because that system is still close enough. It's having some impact. But as far as the rain goes, that is now well away from Bermuda. Our weather is rapidly improving here. As we take a look at our visible satellite picture, you can see just a few wispy clouds over Bermuda, but the main center of circulation is well now to the east, and it continues to weaken, by the way. As of the 11 o'clock advisory, winds are now down to 60 miles per hour, so we'll continue to update this for you. At the National Hurricane Center, they say it will rapidly move away, especially during Friday. It's really going to accelerate and then eventually lose its tropical characteristics as it gets carried away by the westerlies. So lately it's been doing that southeasterly track here, but eventually we do expect it to turn a little bit more toward the north and move away from Bermuda. So that's certainly good news as we head toward the weekend. We do expect Bertha to become extratropical by that time, and basically just a marine hazard way out there in the North Atlantic. We're also watching this cluster of clouds here just to the north of South America affecting Grenada right now. You can see we did have some squally weather roll across the Antilles during the day yesterday, but our weather is improving now here from Guadeloupe down towards Barbados, St. Lucia. Our weather should be improving today as well. But we'll continue to track this system as it continues to track toward the west. Possibility is there that it could develop into a tropical depression. That's one to watch. We're also watching another system quickly heading towards Central America, and it's this one that's going to affect Nicaragua, also Panama. We could see some very heavy rain here, also around Honduras, and keep in mind that's a very hilly countryside, so there may be some flash flooding and mudslides going on with that particular system, whether it becomes a tropical system or not. Same thing here for the coast of the Carolinas down through Georgia, northern Florida. Even though we're not expecting this to become a tropical system now, you can note a little bit of a spin here. It's a weak area of low pressure, and that will continue to cause us some showers and storms from the Carolinas down through North Georgia.
Pacific. So first, I just want to mention, coming off of Africa, there is that next little wave. We'll monitor that for you, but we certainly have Bertha and then a little closer to home off of Florida and a couple areas in the Caribbean to watch. We're going to start with the one closest, and that is the look at Florida, where we certainly have already had some showers out of this little low pressure area as that has kind of moved its way across Florida. That has caused us those problems out there. So here's where it is, just off the coast, and especially once again today, that's going to enhance some of those afternoon thunderstorms, parts of North Florida into Georgia and the Carolinas. You'll see a little bit more of that activity. But in terms of this actually developing into a tropical depression, well, we have one thing working against this. Now, those showers, you need to be concerned about them in terms of enhancing. We already have the high tide right now. So we've got dry air, though, that's coming in on the west side of this, and so we aren't able to get the kind of that circulation or the convection around the circulation with the dry air. So that's impeding this from a little bit more of the development, which is a good thing if you're along the coastline. So that is one of the areas that we're watching, but as I said, watch for some possible coastal flooding because of the potential for this to enhance areas that are already seeing high tide right now. As we head off to the Caribbean, first quickly want to mention that that low pressure area that we'd had in the Western Caribbean has now moved on land, so not the potential for development, but still a rain and flood concern. And then the area that we've been watching all the way off of Africa, we've been monitoring this for you, but the hurricane hunters have been in this the last couple of days, this convection just north of the Antilles. So we'll continue to watch where all of that is, but you can certainly see at the very least it's producing some squally weather and the rain showers for some of the places it has trekked over, and we could continue to see a little bit of possible development on that. So we'll watch for all of those areas as well.
Fairly active at times, and they've gone through these phases. At times we've been watching these waves weaken and strengthening, and right now it looks like we are in a strengthening mode in the Caribbean, and for the third day in a row, the hurricane hunters may investigate. Right now, the high likelihood that a tropical depression could be forming in the central Caribbean as it moves off to the west. It seems to be getting its act together and looking a little better organized right now with some of the banding features and a lot of thunderstorms right here. It's north of Aruba and moving directly west. Now, what's ahead in its path? Right now, there's an upper level low to its north and northwest, and it's going to be a big question and concern. Will that interact with this possible tropical system? Could it turn it, and could it weaken this? Too many questions and not enough answers at this point. Another area worth watching that could turn tropical off the coast of Georgia. It's going to bring a lot of rain to coastal Carolina areas. And speaking of rain,
the center's information tonight and wondering if they are going to upgrade this area off the east coast to a tropical depression. Before we get to that, there is Bertha. It is back to a hurricane as of 5 o'clock this evening, moving safely away from land. But our focus goes here closer to home, where this area of low pressure that was over the central part of the state today has now moved over near the coast of Georgia. It is beginning to develop some tropical characteristics, and at any time this could become the third tropical depression of the year. It appears it has not done so tonight, but the Hurricane Center watching this very closely. You can see the rotation here in these showers and thunderstorms that are with this system just off to our north, but it's going to pull most of the wet weather off to the north, and actually we'll see some dry air filter in here for the weekend. So right now the weekend looks great. We'll see dry weather. We'll be warm with low temperatures in the 90s with just a few scattered showers around. The other two systems we're watching, one has moved inland now, therefore no chance of developing into a tropical depression, but this one here into the Caribbean does have the potential to develop into a tropical depression as well. This one should stay well to our south, even if it decides to. So all good news coming out of the tropics, despite it active. Talk about it off the top of the show. It is now indeed tropical depression number 3 with a swirl here in the atmosphere. You can see the showers and thunderstorms rotating around that center as well. Here's the 11 o'clock advisory, fresh off the press. We're moving to the northeast at about 6 miles per hour, winds at 30, gusts to 40, and there is a tropical storm watch for parts of the Carolinas. We're continuing to get this data in and ingesting it. Pressure still at 1,000 millibars, and this is not going to impact South Florida as the movement again is away from us. But there is a new tropical depression as anticipated tonight off the Georgia and Carolina coast. There goes tropical depression number 3.
Folks, we're going to be dealing with some pretty strong rip currents. This is our brand new system. We'll get there in a flash. There's Bertha, by the way, continuing to move towards the northeast, the longest named system in the Atlantic in July ever. Unbelievable here. It started in Africa, moved all the way across the Atlantic. Also watching a couple disturbances here in the Caribbean as well. Let's dive, though, into the southeast. This is where all the action is right now. Tropical Depression 3. This is now our third system in the Atlantic. That's why we call it TD3. Moving towards the northeast at 6 miles per hour. Winds at 30 miles per hour sustained. So the major impacts aren't going to be from wind damage to structures necessarily or a big surge and flooding and water damage from that. Rip currents, folks. That'll be the biggest concern for us here. So all of you surfers, I can't chain you guys down. You're going to go. Make sure you've got a buddy, that sort of thing. But really try and limit your beach time here. South Carolina, North Carolina coastlines are going to be hopping with rip current activity. That's the stuff that'll just pull you right out there. Even the strongest swimmers can have a big-time twist to it. Showers and thunderstorms persisting over water. That's the bright orange you see. And whenever you have a twist and we have showers and thunderstorms persisting over water, we really need to watch this system closely as it continues working westbound. Another disturbance well off to the west over land now, bringing heavy-duty rain to parts of Central America, Honduras, Guatemala, Nicaragua.
Going a tropical depression of 35 miles per hour, Kelly, but the good news is those 35-mile-per-hour winds are well offshore. Moving to the northeast very slowly, about 5 miles per hour, and that's the problem. It's offshore and moving slow. So it does have potential to become a storm before it nears the North Carolina coast, then merges with the frontal boundary, comes offshore, and basically becomes a non-tropical system. Let's look at some of the features on it right now, though, and we can do that basically with the radar because it's close enough to the coast. Low pressure center here. Now you can see some of the winds behind it. Very weak north-northwest, 16 miles per hour, north-northeast at 13. These are all open water exposures, so they're not even over land. The land winds are even weaker. South-southeast at 9, but some gusts in some of these showers are going to be a little bit stronger. So some of the rain is coming into extreme northern South Carolina, and mostly North Carolina. We think it's going to be the impact with some of these winds stretching up the coast. And there is a tropical storm warning up here, so be careful. It could become a tropical storm, and some of those winds could get gusty in the showers. But overall, we think the impacts are going to be relatively minor with wave action generally in the 5 to 8 foot range on the coast of North Carolina tomorrow. All right, down in the Caribbean we go, and if you're heading to Jamaica today, expect a rainy day and some very windy weather, especially in the showers and thunderstorms. We have a tropical wave here with a mid-level low pressure center right about in here, and that low pressure center keeps trying to work its way down to the surface, and it hasn't done it yet. What do we expect to happen here? This wave is oriented sort of southeast-northwest, and it's going to slide to the northwest. By tomorrow afternoon, it's going to be approaching the Yucatan. And then on Monday, we expect that wave, could be a low pressure center, could be a tropical depression, moving into the southern Gulf of Mexico. So expect rain and showers moving up toward the Cayman Islands, then toward Yucatan. It looks like it's going to be rainy on Sunday there, and some of that could be stretching all the way up into the Gulf of Mexico beyond that time frame. Our hurricane is moving off past 40 north. It'll become a non-tropical system. The rest of the Atlantic is quiet. We have one hurricane out here, Fausto. It's not going to hit land. It's going to continue to move west-northwest. But there are impacts. Watch out, tourists, because there's some wave action
here affecting your beach plans along the North Carolina and South Carolina coastline. Bill Keneally joining me more with this tropical depression, Bill, and it looks like it may be getting a little better organized.
May not be Cristobal, but it's a big orange ball out there, Kelly, and this one does have convection with it. We have this area gaining a little bit of strength now based on the satellite interpretation. Hurricane Center will get an aircraft in there later on today, but there is a new advisory coming out at 11 o'clock. And it'll be very interesting to see if they name this or not. Either way, it is likely on its way to eventually being a named storm. And as Kelly alluded to it, it will be Cristobal sometime down the road here. Right now it is a depression. Top winds are 35 miles per hour. The movement here just edging northeast very slowly at about 5 miles per hour. And the pressure not all that low, though it is lower than yesterday, down to 1,007 millibars. Checking out the location, it's basically east of Charleston. Good news here on the battery, more of an offshore flow today. You're off the hook. The lion's share of the rain now done from Charleston down to Hilton Head and Savannah. However, decidedly onshore flow coming in here. We could be seeing rainfall rates exceeding 1 inch per hour. Watching these beaches here around Sunset Beach and over there by Holden Beach there in...
Back, it's 10 minutes before the top of the hour. It's time for our tropical update. We're keeping a close eye on Tropical Storm Cristobal. It'll be impacting the Carolina coast today, but we're also watching something that could be moving into the Gulf of Mexico. Here's Christina with more and the latest on Cristobal.
Yeah, we just got our latest advisory in on Cristobal, and we have a couple of updates to tell you about. Of course, we're looking out at the big picture around the Atlantic and watching as these disturbances come off the coast of Africa, but we're also watching, there's Cristobal, and then another area of disturbed weather here in the Caribbean that we'll be monitoring. But we want to start out with Tropical Storm Cristobal, which is now strengthening off the South Carolina coast. As a matter of fact, the maximum sustained winds now are 45 miles per hour, and slow strengthening is forecast during the next day or two. It's centered about 125 miles east of Charleston, South Carolina, and we are seeing that it is again continuing to show some signs of strengthening, now up to 45 miles per hour. The latest pressure 1005 millibars. So let's see what's going on as we look at our map here, and again we can update that 40 miles per hour to 45 miles per hour here with this system. So the winds are strengthening. Here's a look at it on the radar view, and we are seeing again one of the effects that we'll be dealing with from this system is the rain and the stormy conditions and some windy conditions. You'll see some squally weather, and you can already see some of those bands rotating in through North Carolina around Goldsboro and Raleigh and just to the west of Fayetteville. And there's even more offshore that's eventually going to affect areas such as Wilmington. You've also had some unsettled conditions in Myrtle Beach. So in addition to the rainy, stormy weather and the windy conditions, as we head toward the coast, we're also going to be dealing with heavy surf, and that heavy surf is going to mean the potential for deadly rip currents. So stay out of the water here, as we'll eventually see those waves 6 to 8 to 10 feet. And dangerous rip currents indeed. Here's the projected path, which eventually takes it out to sea. In the meantime, you'll continue to feel the effects here across South Carolina and certainly here into North Carolina with the rain, the wind, and the heavy surf. We do have tropical storm warnings that are in effect here along the Carolina coast, and these remain in effect from the South Santee River up to the North Carolina-Virginia border. So you'll be feeling the effects of this system as we go through the weekend. One final area we want to show you is what's going on here in the Caribbean. Watching this area of disturbed weather, really making for a messy day here in Kingston with rainy, stormy, windy conditions. We're going to continue to monitor this. There's the possibility that we could see this getting more organized, and if that does happen, we'll let you know. Just keep tuning back into the Weather Channel, and certainly interest here not only around Kingston and Grand Cayman, but over toward the west as we head toward the Yucatan Peninsula. Need to keep an eye on this as well. And we'll continue to forecast it for you. Check back with us every hour.
To the north of Florida, right there, this is the wave we're watching. We're going to start with Cristobal. It still remains a tropical storm at 11 o'clock, and the winds remain at 45 miles per hour. The center of the storm is right about in that position, right about in there. I want to switch over to the other source, and we can definitely see the center and the circulation around this, also bands of rain. So this is basically going to give them gusty winds right along the Carolina coast, the Outer Banks, South Carolina, right through tomorrow night, and you can see the center right in here. So they're going to get the gusty winds and also some heavy rainfall. The actual track is probably going to take it very close to the Outer Banks before it moves over the open waters of the Atlantic. You can see Cristobal, the track tonight, taking it very close to the Outer Banks tomorrow night, and then it accelerates off to the northeast and loses its tropical characteristics by Tuesday. It's probably not going to become a hurricane, just remain a tropical storm. Now, the system to our south looking pretty good. Reconnaissance aircraft was out there earlier today, did not find a closed circulation, so it remains just a tropical wave, but there's very good indications over the next day or two it's going to become a tropical depression or the next tropical storm, Dolly. It is going to move off towards the west, probably touching the Yucatan and then into the Gulf of Mexico. We'll be watching this closely, but again, it doesn't look like this one as well will not be affecting us here in South Florida. My complete local forecast for your Sunday is coming up in just a minute.
Now this is what we are watching, the tropics. Cristobal formed yesterday. At about 2 o'clock, they actually upgraded this to tropical storm status, and it looks like it's going to continue to intensify a little bit more as we head through the next 12 to 24 hours, and then it'll start to weaken. This one is one that we're watching as well. This depression could form at any time. This is just a really strong wave right now headed through the Caribbean. Looks like it will pass us to our south, but could end up here in the Gulf, so we're going to continue to monitor that situation. And then this one also developed all overnight. This is just a little weak wave here, about 350 miles south-southeast of Cuba, and it looks like this is not going to likely develop. However, we're going to watch it for you. And Bertha finally is heading further northward. Still a hurricane, but no longer going to be a problem here in the
Caribbean. As Tropical Storm Cristobal skirted the Outer Banks of the Carolinas, creating windy conditions there and some pretty big waves on the beach. As Cristobal moves away from the U.S., the big question is, will Dolly now pose a threat? Meteorologist John Giraldi joins us now with the latest track. John?
All right, Nikki and Rob, the answer to both questions, Cristobal and Dolly will not pose a threat to us here in South Florida, although Cristobal is very close to the Carolina coast. This is Cristobal right there, Tropical Storm Dolly. Let's go up to Cristobal right now and show you right now it is only 30 miles off the coast as we speak, spinning around. It's a very weak system. There are the outer banks of North Carolina right in here. And remember, the sustained winds at 11 o'clock are at 50 miles per hour. You can see bands of rain spinning around. So the biggest problem with this will be the rain and also a lot of waves and rip currents in this particular area and some strong gusty winds. But this system by tomorrow is going to be scooting off over the open waters of the Atlantic and getting out of their way. This is the official track of Cristobal as of 11 o'clock. You can see after tomorrow just scooting well south into the open waters of the Atlantic and then becoming extratropical. So we can say goodbye to Cristobal coming up later tomorrow and the next day. There's Dolly well to our south, getting close to the Yucatan Peninsula. There it is right in there, the center. Remember, it just went up to 50 miles per hour as well, from 45 to 55. We're waiting for the latest computer forecast track, but I can show you the model runs, taking it over the northern edge of the Yucatan Peninsula as a tropical storm sometime tonight and tomorrow morning, and then we're getting indications that it may strengthen once it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, probably by Wednesday into a Category 1 hurricane before it hits sometime Thursday night along the southern coast of Texas or northern coast of Mexico. So that's the very latest right now. We'll have much more on these, plus our local forecast.
Está ya a menos de 100 millas de la costa mexicana, a menos de 100 millas de Cozumel, México, para ser específico, moviéndose hacia el noroeste a 14 millas por hora, buen paso que lleva esta tormenta, vientos máximos de 50. A esta velocidad de traslación es improbable que Dolly llegue a ser huracán antes de llegar a la península de Yucatán mexicana, pero lo que se anticipa es que cuando ya haya cruzado al sur del Golfo de México, ahí cobre fuerza de huracán y luego se dirija en 72 horas a la zona fronteriza entre México y Texas, donde pudiera, repito, llegar como huracán Dolly a tierra. Así que esa región estará obviamente preocupada sobre su progreso. Cristobal, mientras tanto, es una tormenta de muy poca intensidad, bastante desorganizada, próxima a la costa de Carolina del Norte. Los vientos máximos de Cristobal también son de 50 millas por hora, se mueve hacia el noreste a 6 millas por hora y estará separándose de la costa norteamericana durante los próximos días, con pocas consecuencias porque se convertirá en un sistema extratropical, perderá sus características tropicales de aquí a 48 horas antes de poder llegar a las provincias orientales del Canadá. Mientras tanto, en el sur de la Florida hubo
season. It's certainly been heating up out there. We had our third named storm form on Saturday, Cristobal, and our fourth named storm form yesterday, Dolly. So here is the setup. We've got Cristobal up to our north off the North Carolina coastline. It's continuing to move up to the northeast, and we've got Tropical Storm Dolly to our south in the western Caribbean, affecting the western edge of Cuba and the northern edge of the Yucatan Peninsula. You can see all the convection associated with it. Now, with Dolly, could further intensify as it continues into the Gulf of Mexico, so we'll continue to watch that as it moves towards the northwest. Cristobal moving out to the northeast, so we're right smack in the middle, which is the perfect spot. A ridge of high pressure is helping to protect us from the tropical trouble. Now, we are seeing a couple of high clouds on the northern edge.
Abrams and Betha beyond the forecast. We bring in our hurricane expert, Dr. Steve Lyons. Dr. Lyons, one thing we can say with certainty is that there will be a landfall. What people at home may want to now know is what's the impact going to be, especially along the Texas coast?
Well, we don't know exactly the impact yet, Mike, because it's a little too early, but the impacts are going to come way before the center of circulation actually makes landfall, that's for sure, because we have a very broad blustery wind field of about 20 to 30 miles per hour. Currently 50 miles per hour, moving west-northwest at 18. You can see this large cloud canopy. As a matter of fact, as Stephanie just mentioned, high clouds encroaching on the Texas coast. When you wake up in the morning, it's going to be a quite different environment. Winds will be up a little bit all along the Texas coast. And here's the circulation right here, trying to organize a little center of circulation. We're trying to get an eye forming there into a hurricane, but it's probably going to take longer than overnight to do that. But you can see some broad areas of 25, 30 mile per hour winds, especially in this band of rain right in here. It's going to be pushing up the Texas coast before the center gets there and well away from that center of circulation. All right, where do we think it's going to go over the next 24 to 36 hours? It's going to head generally in the direction it's heading, and then at the last minute turn just slightly toward the west as the upper level winds come out of the northeast. but it's still possible to get as far north as the Corpus Christi area, Rockport area. We think the best estimate right now is South Texas, northern Mexico, and the time frame would be Wednesday p.m. Now keep in mind, notice how it slows quite a bit here, so the impacts will come as early as tomorrow afternoon. We'll see some rain coming onshore and some blustery weather. And then as it gets closer, some of those impacts will come onshore well before it ever makes landfall, probably in South Texas, but affecting much of the Texas coastline with some blustery weather. So pay attention to that. The waves will be rising tomorrow at about 5-6 feet and then increasing rapidly tomorrow night. In the meantime, Tropical Storm Cristobal, it's basically going to stay offshore and become an extratropical system. Don't worry there in the northeast. No waves from that one. If you're heading down to the Caribbean, the good news is here you're going to have a great vacation. We do have one low pressure center. Again, another low pressure. This is not a wave coming off the African coast out here, but it's very far from land. So let's go over to the Eastern Pacific where you're going down to the Mexico.
Bueno, ya saben que hay dos tormentas tropicales actualmente. Una de ellas se va retirando rápidamente de la costa norteamericana. Es la tormenta Cristobal, que estuvo así pegadita a la costa de las Carolinas. Actualmente tiene vientos de 60 millas por hora, habiendo ya alcanzado su pico de 65 millas por hora. Eso había ocurrido ya durante el día de ayer. Así que de Cristobal no habrá que preocuparse. Tal vez en el área de Nueva Escocia, ya en el Canadá, un poquito de preocupación sobre su trayectoria, pero en general debe mantenerse sobre mar abierto. Mientras tanto, Dolly es ya de suma preocupación para esta parte del mundo. El sur de Texas hasta el norte de México ya no es vigilancia de huracán, es aviso de huracán que se ha emitido para esa región porque pudiera llegar en unas 36 horas a algún punto entre Río San Fernando aquí en México hacia el norte hasta la zona de Port O'Connor en Texas. Es ahí donde está el aviso de huracán esta noche. Tiene latitud y longitud en pantalla, se mueve hacia el oeste, 17 millas por hora, vientos todavía de solo 50 millas por hora, pero Dolly debe fortalecerse. Está pasando sobre aguas muy cálidas en exceso de 29 grados centígrados en las próximas horas y los vientos en altura favorecen su desarrollo, así que se debe convertir en un huracán. Lo que tenemos alguna confianza es de que no debería llegar a ser un huracán de gran magnitud, no debería ser categoría 3, ni 4, ni 5, tal vez se quede en categoría 1, repito, llegando a la costa posiblemente en unas 36 horas. Bueno, vamos a pasar al tiempo.
At home, South Florida, come to your television screen. You can already see this deep convection really starting to make its way counterclockwise. It's coming better organized. The system just 12 hours ago was so disorganized and really just out of the ordinary of what we were watching yesterday compared to what we're seeing now. All thanks to the very high sea surface temperatures, keeping that warm water really starting to designate some of the areas I am watching. Look at, you can even see some of this area starting to make landfall. Just some isolated thunderstorms as of now. Very breezy conditions with this system. The latest advisory has Dolly with winds 60 miles per hour sustained. The pressure is at 997 millibars. It's moving to the west at 15 miles per hour, and it's located 295 miles just southeast of Brownsville, Texas. Let me show you what's going on with the cone. Once again, they have it category 1 as it makes its way on land by later on tonight and into tomorrow. So this is what we're going to be watching very closely. The worst part of the system will be on the right-hand side of the system as it makes landfall in the southern half of Texas. So this is something that we will be watching very closely. Not only that, we have hurricane watches in effect from Rio, San Fernando, all the way up to Port O'Connor. We are watching a tropical storm warning from Port O'Connor up towards San Luis Pass, and then we have a hurricane watch from Rio, San Fernando, all the way down towards La Pesca. I'll be back with your full
3 or 4 weeks. All right, let's go to this year and talk about Dolly. What do I think's going on with that? I think it's developing. Let me show you the visible satellite, and you can see there's just this huge ball of convection near the center. But what's most interesting to us and what Dr. Lyons has taught us about is a feature called the cross-banded cirrus. Now, these are high-level clouds, but they indicate to us strengthening. Where are they? They look like eyelashes, all right, on the outer fringes of that big white convection ball. So those little phalanges that look like eyelashes, or it looks like, if you will, the legs of a jellyfish. Since I'm at the ocean, I might as well use that for an analogy. That's an indication to us that we have that cross-banded cirrus and strengthening of this storm. So as the hurricane hunters continue their missions out there, and we transfer from Tampa to the folks in Biloxi at the Air Force Reserves, we're probably going to see some strengthening both in the pressure drops and the winds coming up, which is exactly what we've seen so far this morning already. So this trend should continue. Unfortunately, Cheryl, we're also seeing the storm slow down, which gives it a further chance to strengthen, and the waves a further chance to build up. Back to you.
All right, but more intensified as it moves through the Gulf of Mexico. The folks in Brownsville should be keeping their eyes on it, as the folks in northern Mexico as well should be really watching this system, because we could see some intensification right before it makes landfall. As of the 11 a.m. advisory, 24.0 north, 94.5 west, maximum sustained winds of 70 miles per hour, so that keeps it a tropical storm. Pressure 991 millibars, and that has been dropping 230 miles southeast of Brownsville, Texas at this hour and on the move. So as we look at the track over time, later on the day.
Right now, take a look at the deep convection indicated by the purples and the reds moving over very warm waters headed towards the Texas and Mexican coastline. As of the 11 a.m. advisories, winds have increased to 70 miles per hour. It slowed down a little bit. It's moving towards the northwest at 12 miles per hour, located 230 miles southeast of Brownsville, Texas. And the National Hurricane Center's future intensity track shows that cone of uncertainty still taking Dolly over into the area anywhere from Texas through the northeastern Mexican coastline, and could be possibly a Category 1 hurricane at any point tomorrow before making landfall, and then should weaken to a tropical storm once it moves inland. So everywhere from Corpus Christi down to San Fernando and even south of that is in that forecast cone. Now, Cristobal, nothing to worry about with Cristobal moving out and away from the U.S. Wind speed 65 miles per hour and moving towards the northeast at 25 miles per hour. Now, we are watching the strong tropical wave still moving off the coast of Africa. Still the medium potential for development with this area of low pressure. In the meantime, locally, our weather is calm and quiet. We've got
convection that's starting to circulate right around the center of circulation here. We can see that some of the higher and stronger cloud bands are to the north and the east of the center of circulation, but nonetheless, this is a very, very organized tropical storm. You could see the outer bands here flowing all the way out to the north and the east. We have been watching a little upper level low just to the south and west of the center of circulation, and that is pretty much cutting off some of the outer bands to the south of this system, but nonetheless it's very, very organized on its north side here, and we do think that it will continue to slowly strengthen over the next 12 to 24 hours, again, as it gets closer to the coast of Texas and to northern Mexico. So please, if you're in the western Gulf of Mexico, say from Corpus Christi southward, then you need to prepare now for this tropical storm, soon to be hurricane, that'll be making landfall within the next 24 hours. Biggest impacts, of course, the waves will be pretty high, so it's kind of choppy along the coast. You definitely don't want to be out on the coast. But we think that locally heavy rain will be a result of this tropical system too, anywhere from 5 to 8 inches, and some localized areas could pick up as much as 10 inches of rain from.
Observers are out there flying around, found a 986 millibar pressure, which is down a little bit, so it's on the precipice of hurricane. We're waiting for the latest advisory. Previous one, wind 70 miles per hour. As best we can tell right now, it's moving northwest at about 12 miles per hour, which would put it very close to the coast near the Mexican border tomorrow morning just after sunrise. Now let's look at a couple of the features on the radar imagery, because that's going to be a telltale sign of where the rain is going to occur. And you can see most of the heavy rain are in these bands around the circulation center. Some of the other rain is basically dying away as it's coming to the coast, which is good news in some ways and in bad news in others, because you need some of the rain on the central Texas coast. But nevertheless, some of this heavy rain is going to continue to accumulate, particularly in South Texas, over the next 24 to 36 hours. Here's our projected path. Tomorrow morning onshore near the Mexico-Texas border, with some wobbles along the way, and very likely a Category 1 hurricane at the time it does so. If not,
wind is now up, the waves are up, and it's only expected to get worse. Hurricane Dolly is everything is now eyeing the South Texas coast. The National Hurricane Center put out a new advisory just moments ago. We'll speak with its director in just a moment, but first, let's go out to the scene. CNN's Brian Todd is joining us now live from South Padre Island, right on the path of this storm. It looks, Brian, like it's intensifying. It's now a hurricane, a formal hurricane, expected to hit sometime tomorrow. Give us the latest.
Well, Wolf, as you mentioned, a hurricane means the winds are above 74, 75 miles an hour, and you can see the surf behind me has started to kick up. I'm standing just about in it right now. We're going to walk up a little up the beach here a little bit, you can see there are rain bands forming behind us. A lot of people still on the beach trying to get a last kind of glimpse of this before the storm hits the shore. And, some of them not necessarily heeding warnings from local officials to get off the beach. So they're not calling for this area to be evacuated. But a few miles away from here in Brownsville, Texas, that town is right in the path of Hurricane Dolly. And folks there know how to get ready. One of the most popular spots in Brownsville, 4 large piles of sand between an elementary and middle school. A long line of cars snakes down the driveway, then far down the road. People have to show ID to prove they live here. And no one gets more than 20 bags of free sand. Maribel Vallejo's waited 2 hours, but she's been through hurricanes here before and isn't complaining.
Well, I'm being patient because it's something we have to do to avoid any flooding going into our homes. Well, I'm not in a flood zone, but just to protect our home.
Those who don't want to wait pay for sand at the local Home Depot, where there's also a run on 4-by-8-foot plywood sheets, and the only generators left are used. This town is right in Dolly's path, and on every street, people are hammering, drilling, and stacking.
We put in sandbags, never for the water not to go inside the house.
Brownsville Mayor Pat Omada's been through several hurricanes here. Right now, with Dolly still projected to be a Category 1 hurricane, he's urging residents not to panic.
We do not foresee the need to make it mandatory to evacuate. People can evacuate voluntarily if they want to, but I think we can weather the storm out just by being vigilant and staying indoors.
Some oil companies with rigs offshore are taking no chances. Helicopters have been shuttling back and forth since Sunday, evacuating hundreds of workers. And as you can see again from the surf behind me is our photographer, Bill Alberter. He's going to pan down the beach a little bit. You can see the surf has really started to kick up here. The storm just hours away from making landfall very near here. And what that means is what we're told by the National Weather Service is the winds could become as strong as maybe between 100 and 115 miles an hour by the time they make shore tomorrow, roughly about 9 a.m. local time. That's 10 a.m. Eastern time. And the winds could be that strong even when they move inland, Wolf. What's a big concern right now with officials here and in Brownsville is the rainfall that's going to come. We were told by the National Weather Service expect at least 10 inches of rain in some of those areas, maybe 15 in some places. That's going to cause major problems with flooding, and we'll bring you that when we know it.
Brian's on the scene for us in South Padre Island. Stand by, Brian. I want to get the latest forecast right now directly from Bill Reed. He's the director of the National Hurricane Center in Miami. Director Reed, thanks very much. Give us the sense. Brian is at South Padre Island in Texas right now. How worried should folks over there be?
Well, we're going to have a hurricane come ashore there during the day tomorrow, probably in the early morning hours, and they'll have adverse weather from now on in. As you can see on the satellite loop behind me, the bright white colors are the increasing intensity at the center of the storm. Aircraft hurricane hunters just reported back right at the time of the advisory of hurricane strength winds at the surface, so we have upgraded it. Switch over to the track forecast, and this is the track that we're anticipating in the next 12 to 24 hours is going to come on shore, and then it's going to move very slowly right up the Rio Grande. That's our big concern, is on the beach you're going to have very high winds, storm surge up to about 5 or 6 feet, and just to the near and to the right of where the center actually makes landfall. So it's not going to be a picnic out on Padre Island.
We're talking a Category 1, what, 74, 75 miles per hour, or much more than that?
We're not anticipating too much more from that. You got to allow for some fluctuation, so up to that point. But we are forecasting it to be in the Category 1 range. The officials there are prepared for up to a Category 2 hurricane in the lower Rio Grande Valley. Again, our biggest concern, though, is going to be after landfall, the very heavy rain that will occur there. I'll show you that on this next graphic here. The area highlighted in red there is the area subject to the heaviest rains that they were talking about, the average of 10 inches and some places in excess of 15. That'll cause severe ponding and could become really problematic for many of the villages and communities down in that area, much as what happened with the rainfall way back in '67 with Beulah.
Stand by for a second, because Chad Myers, Director Reed, is our severe weather expert. He's joining us right now. I know he has a question he wants to ask you as well. Chad, go ahead.
Well, Mr. Reed, I think the problem we're going to see now is people are going to focus on the I landfall. And I think we need to stress that conditions are going to go downhill from here rather rapidly. And if you are on a barrier island, you will need to get off that island before tomorrow afternoon, because by the time tomorrow afternoon hits, there'll be no way to get off those islands.
That's correct. Anyone in the far South Texas barrier islands that don't want to ride out the rough conditions of a hurricane should be leaving now and not waiting till tomorrow. It'll be too late. The low roads that come from your beach houses and hotels there could easily be overwashed and would make travel extremely dangerous and not recommended.
To a Hurricane Category 1 system, and indeed those outer bands are already moving in over Louisiana, Texas, and Mexico. So this is the latest advisory. Winds are up now to 75 miles per hour, 24.6 north, 95.3 west, moving northwest at around 10. And now the center of circulation, 165 miles east-southeast of Brownsville, Texas. And this is a really good-looking hurricane. It is very well organized. There's a center of circulation making a beeline now for the coast between Texas and Mexico. Very latest radar suggesting that the eye is starting to close up. You can see the strong line of thunderstorm activity along the eye wall. Plenty of rain moving in, much needed rain. Unfortunately, it's coming attached with a hurricane. Now, the official forecast cone is...
Buenas tardes, John. Tienen que estar preparados allá en Texas ya desde ahora.
Así es, y estaremos hablando de Dolly y de Cristobal, también la tormenta que ya se aleja de los Estados Unidos. Recuerden que Cristobal casi fue huracán, pero al final de cuentas no, y ya se aleja, no, ni siquiera impactará a las provincias orientales del Canadá. Y ahora nos enfocamos en Dolly, porque hay mucho de qué hablar en cuanto a este sistema se refiere. El aviso de huracán comprende desde Río San Fernando hacia el norte hasta Port O'Connor, Texas. Ahí se anticipa que las condiciones de huracán lleguen mañana, pero los vientos de tormenta tropical pueden empezar esta misma noche porque la circulación de Dolly es bastante amplia. Vientos actuales 75 millas por hora, traslación noroeste 10 millas por hora, está como a unas 160 millas de llegar a la costa. Vean la imagen de satélite, todavía no tiene el ojo muy bien definido, está más o menos en esta región, moviéndose hacia el noroeste, como les dije. Ya estas bandas de precipitación empiezan a llegar a la costa, inclusive la lluvia tan al norte como la costa de Luisiana y cerca al área de Houston, pero el núcleo de este huracán, lo ven aquí abajo con el ojo tratando de formarse mientras se mueve hacia el noroeste, a esa zona fronteriza entre Texas y México. Llegaría, por cierto, mañana en horas del mediodía y pudiera ser más fuerte de lo que es actualmente. Tiene vientos de 75, pudiera tal vez ser un poco más intenso. Tendremos más información.
Weather alert, Dolly is now a hurricane and she is full speed ahead, plowing towards the United States. The countdown to landfall is on. In southern Texas, 1,200 National Guardsmen have been activated. Entire blocks of homes and businesses have been boarded up. People are fleeing for higher ground, but Claudia Cowan is right in the path of the hurricane. Claudia joins us live. Claudia.
Well, Greta, good evening. We're starting to get pelted now by the outer bands. It's been on and off all day, but I'm looking at raindrops now, and the winds are really starting to pick up as well. My wind meter is telling me it's blowing between 15 and 20 miles per hour. And even though the center of this storm is still more than 100 miles away, we are really starting to feel the effects. And conditions are really starting to deteriorate now rapidly. Earlier today, a number of surfers came out here to take advantage of the big waves here at South Padre Island, but late this afternoon, they all got kicked out. Now, giant waves are expected to batter the south coast here in southern Texas when this hurricane makes landfall right around noon local time tomorrow. Greta, no one's been evacuated here on South Padre Island just yet. A number of tourists, in fact, are still walking around taking a look at the storm surge behind me. But what people are doing is they are moving their RVs and their high-profile vehicles farther inland as a safety precaution. And once those winds start to pick up a little more strength, we're talking 45 to 50 miles per hour, officials are expected to close the bridge that links South Padre Island, a resort town, a beach community, to the rest of Texas. And that is now expected to happen sometime in the next few hours. Greta, back to you.
Claudia, are the people taking this serious? I mean, lots of times there are a lot of holdouts who want to sort of be brave and stick around, but are people making preparations? Because this could be ugly.
You know, by all accounts, from what we saw as we drove down to South Padre Island today, people are taking steps to ride this storm out. Again, we are not seeing mass evacuations or even self-evacuations at this point. What we are seeing are block after block of boarded up windows in homes and in businesses. And in fact, home supply centers like Home Depot are reporting very brisk sales of things like generators, plywood, flashlights, batteries, tarps, that kind of thing. So it does appear that people are taking this seriously. Of course, it all depends on what Dolly does overnight, because this could turn out to be a massive and well-organized rescue effort, or as we saw at this very time last summer, as I was standing here talking about Hurricane Dean, which avoided this area, this could turn out to be a great opportunity for a dry run.
All right, Claudia, thank you. And right now, Hurricane Dolly intends to be violent, so when and where is she supposed to or going to strike? Joining us live, Fox News meteorologist Dominica Davis. Dominica.
Hi, Greta. Well, this storm right now is about 130 miles to the southeast of Brownsville. And notice the track here. It is a Category 1 right now with 75-mile-per-hour winds. It's expected to be a Category 1 tomorrow as it makes landfall at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Let's say afternoon, between noon and 2 o'clock. That's when we'll expect that landfall. It's right now moving to the northwest at 11 miles per hour. This forward speed is expected to slow down, and that's going to really cause problems because as it moves on to land, it's going to do so very slowly, which means, Greta, we are going to see a lot of rain and perhaps major flooding problems. Here's a look at the winds right now. You heard Claudia say that those winds have been picking up over the past 3 hours. They're roughly between 25 and 30 miles per hour. Now, here's that center of the storm. It's sitting 130 miles away from Brownsville. Tropical storm force winds extend out 160 miles, but those hurricane winds are tightly wrapped and they only extend out 15 miles. So really, as we get well into the overnight and tomorrow, those winds are going to get worse, and the outer rain bands that have been on and off throughout the day are certainly going to intensify. Now, here's the impacts that we'll be looking at not only tomorrow, but right into Thursday. 6 to 10 inches of rain, and that's from the slow movement that we're expecting through the overnight and tomorrow morning. We could have isolated amounts of 15 plus inches, so we're talking some pretty good flooding. Coastal surges should be around 4 to 6 feet, and those wind gusts near landfall on that northeastern quadrant where Brownsville is expected to be in could be up to 115 miles per hour. Those are some strong gusty winds. We'll keep you updated throughout the evening and tomorrow. Greta?
In on Hurricane Dolly, so this one is a 7 o'clock local time here in the central time zone. Sustained winds around 75 miles per hour, still moving on towards the northwest at 11, and the pressure has been roughly around 982 millibars, has been falling throughout the day. As pressure falls, typically the storm increases and the winds should increase as well. So we're still keeping an eye on this as it continues to make a beeline for parts of southern Texas and also parts of the northern coast of Mexico. This radar goes back 6 hours. You can see that's where it was 6 hours ago. That's where the center is roughly now. And you continue that out 6 hours from now, just before dawn, it's lurking offshore somewhere around the U.S.-Mexican border here. So definitely, this is as good as it's going to get. The Causeway Bridge leading out of South Padre is closing in 10 minutes. If you're not out of there, then you better be prepared for conditions going downhill. Already seeing one band of rain coming on through, already pushing on through Brownsville right now. That's how far inland it is. But the bulk and brunt of the rain continues to be just offshore and will be moving onshore easily over the next 2 hours. Then probably nonstop rain buffeting South Padre Island for the next easily maybe 6, maybe even 10 plus hours. The winds, throughout the coastline, they've been steadily increasing. These are sustained winds from 5 to 10 to 15, now to 20 miles per hour. And some of the buoys offshore are still, this one has been in the 30 and 40 mile per hour range since I got to work tonight. We're talking like talking easily 5 hours. So we're talking about a huge swath of tropical storm force winds will be coming on shore with this system as well. So yeah, that's why you need to be prepared already.
Even tonight, the 11 o'clock advisory now just out of the press for a couple of moments. And you can see what's happening here on the satellite representation, the IR, the reds here. Those are the coldest cloud tops. Very intense showers and thunderstorms. This storm is now moving to the northwest at about 9 miles per hour, heading towards Brownsville, Texas, and the northeastern shore here of mainland Mexico. Here it is, the 11 o'clock advisory. Winds sustained 80 miles per hour, gusting to 100. And there's that movement north northwest at 9. Pressure continues to drop, now 981 millibars. You can see the radar representation, pretty solid core of showers and thunderstorms on the northwestern quadrant here as that motion has taken it right for Brownsville, Texas. Bands have been moving from Corpus Christi across Houston as far east as New Orleans even tonight. A lot of cloud with this storm as well, and as we continue through the overnight hours, what's going to happen with the wind field as the tropical storm winds will come on shore tonight. That's 39 to 57 miles per hour, and the hurricane force core here in the red, which is actually rather small, by 8 a.m. on Wednesday. That's when we expect the core of the hurricane force winds to begin coming ashore and then moving inland here as a weakening tropical storm by 8 p.m. on Wednesday into the early hours on Thursday. Now, elsewhere in the tropics, it has been quiet across the Atlantic basin except one wave coming off the coast of Africa. Good news with this one tonight
in the Texas Gulf Coast. Let's go back to CNN severe weather expert Chad Mars with the latest. Chad?
Well, we now have a tornado watch for most of southern Texas because, as you know, Anderson, hurricanes can bring small tornadoes on shore with them. And then even inland, when you get the spin still kind of coming in there. This is the longest hurricane or tornado watch I've ever seen. This goes until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Like an 11-hour watch box. But that is what's going to be happening for the next few days. And this is going to be stalling, making an awful lot of rainfall. Typically, we show hurricanes on the satellite because they're so far out there, the radars won't go that far. But this storm now, visible by the radar and less than 100 miles from shore, should be covering land and coming on shore here just south of Brownsville, probably somewhere between northern Mexico, 20 miles north or south probably of the Rio Grande exit there of the mouth. And that's going to happen somewhere around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. It could be a little bit earlier than that, but the forecast is for this to just slow down. You think, oh, slow down, that's great. No, it isn't great because when it's slowing down, it's really going to start to slow down about here, and that's when it's just going to rain and rain and rain. There's 230 miles of levees here to keep the Rio Grande in its banks here from McAllen almost all the way down to Brownsville. Many of those levees are in trouble already. Some of the pressure issues are coming out here from the emergency managers saying stay away from those levees. They haven't really been used since Beulah, which was back in 1967 when a hurricane came on shore and stopped in West Texas. But they're definitely going to be used here. We don't think that they're strong enough to hold back the water, so stay out of the way if you are near them, is what we're getting from the emergency managers down there. Flood watch is in effect, now a tornado watch in effect, hurricane warning in effect. It's going to be one busy night, and this is going to be one pounding storm.
Something like that, but no, this is what we call the CDO, central dense overcast, the ball of heavy convection, the solid rain right around the eye of the hurricane. And right now, the eye of the hurricane's clouded over, but the radar certainly can see it quite well, and right in through this area right here. And that's what's tracking all the way up toward extreme northern areas of Mexico, northeastern Mexico, towards South Texas, across South Padre. Now you'll have that storm tide coming in, and not only will you have the rise due to the surge of the wind blowing the water in, but also some of the battering waves up on top of that. And the area most concerned with.
Right off the top at 5, we're tracking Dolly. The radar is showing the storm coming close to the Gulf Coast.
The winds ahead of it already whipping up waves along the southern coastline. Good morning, South Florida. I'm Christine Cruz.
And I'm Diana Diaz. 7's Julie Bertha is in the Storm Center with the newest advisory.
Well, good morning, ladies, and good morning, South Florida. That is correct. As of the 5 o'clock advisory, still seeing very strong conditions with this Hurricane 1 that we're watching. Dolly itself is moving its way on towards Texas and Mexico. Now, the outer band of the Hurricane Dolly is actually hitting the coastline of Texas down by Brownsville and the northern part of Mexico. So let me show you the latest statistics as of 5 a.m. this morning. The winds have increased to 85 miles per hour. The pressure has decreased to 976 millibars. It is moving to the north and west. It slowed down tremendously to 8 miles per hour. And as of now, it is located 65 miles southeast of Brownsville, Texas. So let me show you what's going on with the cone as we take this full. It is approaching, once again, the Texas border and Mexico border and the coastline. And later on today, we are anticipating this to make landfall. And as it does so, it will continue to be the worst part of the storm to the right-hand side of the system. Now, we are watching just a little tidbit you might want to know. They are in a drought right now, a severe drought right by Brownsville, and we are anticipating to possibly see just about 5 inches of rain with this system. Stick around, I'll have your full forecast. Don't leave home without you the intensification of this system. The outer bands have been hitting the very tail end of Texas and the northwestern half of Mexico for the last hour. So they have been getting their fair share of rain and their wind already. Now the eye itself is still over water. We'll be watching this very closely over the next couple hours as it heads in to make landfall. As of now, it is a Category 1. The winds are sustained at 85 miles per hour. The pressure 972 millibars. It's moving to the north and west at 8 miles per hour. It is located 55 miles east of Brownsville, Texas. So as we're watching that, the cone itself keeps it as a Category 1 as it hits landfall, and then it starts to weaken as we head into Thursday. I'll have more on this in your local forecast. Don't leave home without your umbrella. I'll tell you why. Coming up.
And team coverage now from the Weather Center to where the storm may be centering. The Category 1 hurricane is still gaining strength, and residents in South Texas and Mexico are prepared for the worst.
Sean Caleb's has more on the conditions from South Padre Island, Texas.
A long, wet, windy night here in the southeastern part of Texas, but it is expected to get much worse throughout the day. Dolly is expected to be a soaker. After bouncing around in the Gulf, Dolly composed herself, intent on making a date with the Texas-northern Mexico border. Packing strong winds, but it's Dolly's heavy rain that has officials concerned.
We always plan for the worst-case scenario.
Hundreds of National Guard troops set up staging areas in Austin and San Antonio. If levees all along the Rio Grande give way, flooding could be widespread. South Padre, a barrier island off the coast of Brownsville, is exposed to a possible 6-foot storm surge. Still,
the last 2 times hurricanes have even come through here, we went to San Antonio and got way worse weather in San Antonio than they got here.
Even though many fled, leaving the one bridge to the mainland nearly void of traffic just before the hurricane hit, some refused to throw in the towel.
It's been a year since I had my last vacation, and that was back in Galveston, so enjoyed the beach a lot. I was out there on my boogie board earlier, and I was having the blast of my life.
Much too dangerous to go out in the surf anytime in the near future. The warnings are out, and this storm is expected to dump as much as 15 inches of rain on parts of Texas. Still, the mayor of Brownsville has not ordered evacuations yet, saying he expects his residents will fare well. In South Padre Island, I'm Sean Calebs.
In South Texas as Hurricane Dolly nears the coast, and agonizingly slow, in fact. It's temporarily gone stationary just off the coast of Brownsville. You see the circulation center there in the visible satellite image. Large cloud canopy. The bad news about slowing down is heavy rain potential is there when that happens. We expect it to continue on a forward course toward the west eventually later today and tonight, bringing all that rain in. The strongest winds still remain just offshore, but that's going to change very shortly. There you see the circulation center just meandering ever so slowly toward the coast and then temporarily stationary. Now, one of the things, notice the ring of heavy rain in yellow around that eye wall has temporarily dropped away to the north and is only on the southwest side. So the winds temporarily have weakened along the coast where Jim Cantori is in South Padre. But nevertheless, the pressure is fairly low, and that overall wind field is going to come onshore. Notice the tornado watch box here. Bands of heavy rain still coming onshore as far north as Corpus Christi. Matter of fact, a couple of very heavy rain bands in there are going to accumulate some rain there the next hour or two. Watch for some local street flooding up there, well away from the circulation center. Okay, what do we expect to happen the next 24 hours? Heavy rain already offshore. We've seen.
Just a few hours ago was grass, was land. Now you can see the Gulf of Mexico and the bay have made it like a raging rapids. That billboard was on land. We're standing right now on the causeway. In front of me is the bridge that links South Padre Island with the mainland. This is the barrier island, 34 miles long. Normally, there are 2,000 people who live here, but in summer weekends, there are up to 200,000 people who are here. Most people have evacuated, but there are a lot of people still here. We have seen roofs collapse. We have seen signs go down. Firefighters are all over helping people evacuate. We decided not to evacuate. But you can see this is a Category 2 hurricane, and it's incredibly treacherous, and most people are surprised by how strong it is. This is Gary Tuck with CNN, South Padre Island, Texas.
Experiencing just moments ago.
Earlier today, when we were coming to you, we were dealing with wind mainly out of the north. Right now, the wind is due west. It is coming in sheets, not in drops. We've been dealing with all kinds of debris, pieces of roofs, trees, tile, you name it, it's all been coming by. Now, as the storm continues to march westward, we do expect it to lose a bit of its intensity. The wind should die down, but then it's a rainmaker and a true threat for parts of South Texas. Reporting from South Padre Island, Reynolds Wolf, CNN.
And that is our Reynolds Wolf getting battered about, as are many of our correspondents and our meteorologists here on the ground. Working here in-house, our Chad Miles talking to our other meteorologists and our entire weather team here. Chad, getting some new information. It's happening so fast, he had to come over and get it. Talk to us.
We have so many computers, Don, that we can't do all from one program and all from one location. This actually can show us the Doppler radar. We're looking right down here at South Padre where he was, but I can put on this ugly view of the greens and the reds, the coming and the going wind, and then I can go and I can query.
Well, thanks, Dave. And we continue to monitor a situation where the circulation is moving inland, so the threat at the coast will be diminishing, but inland we've got a big rain problem here. You can see the circulation moving inland now, slowly but steadily. Wind gusts very strong, but now heavy rain moving toward Harlingen. Also Brownsville, the northern portions of it, and other northern suburbs, heavy rain there. And of course, Port Isabel still has heavy rain. Now let me show you how much rain accumulations we're estimating right now, at least down in South Texas, on the order of getting close to 10 or 11 inches of rain so far, and the event is not over yet. The system is still moving inland. There's still a lot of rain to come. As a matter of fact, here's the radar image, and you can see the center moving onshore. These big bands of rain in the western sector are going to be moving off to the west-northwest, but there's still a lot of rain off to the southeast as well on the other side of the circulation that still has to come inland. Even though you don't see much rain in here, oftentimes bands will flare up as the system remains fairly strong, just like this band has flared up and is now aiming right across the greater Corpus Christi area and producing some fairly heavy rain there, although the rain rates up here are not near as great as they are down in South Texas. It's going to remain a South Texas problem the next 24 to 36 hours. And the problem with this rain threat that we see is, even though the system is moving inland, as high pressure builds to the north and this low pressure aloft gets out of the way, the steering becomes fairly weak for the next 18 hours. And so the system could slow down just a little bit as it's dissipating and produce tremendous amounts of rain in South Texas. So we've already got 10 inches, we've already got flooding. So the bottom line is, if you live in a low-lying area or near a creek or a stream that typically tends to flood, and you haven't had the heavy rain yet, and you're down in South Texas, be ready to get to higher elevation very quickly, because some of these rain rates could top 4 inches per hour, as we've seen down near Port Isabel over the last few hours. So the rain rate threat and the rain persistence threat over the next 24 hours is going to be the biggest impact beyond the coastal line.
Not a whole lot over to its east. Let's take a look. Here are our high-resolution radar. Here's Brownsville right here. So the circulation center, the eye, has passed north of Brownsville, continues to head northwest. But look here, all of the heaviest rain is now off to its southwest side, almost none off to its northeast side. So the hurricanes change character. What I thought I would show you inside the box here, I'm going to zoom in and give you the perspective as if you were one of the hurricane hunters with our 3D radar. So here I've made the clouds this grayish shade, and take a look here as I tilt it up a little bit. Look at this wall of clouds here. You see if I can get that H to come off of there and get the arrow to come back. See that wall of clouds? And then the almost absolutely clear eye inside of this, a fairly broad eye of Hurricane Dolly. So,
update, of course, we are continuing to follow Hurricane Dolly. It is a Category 1 hurricane now with winds of 95 miles an hour. So just an update on this particular graphic, but you can see that the entire center of circulation, or the eye itself, has totally moved onshore for the most part. Just about 30 minutes ago, the eastern part of the eye wall was still offshore, but now it appears as though the eastern eye wall has started to push onshore. So this system has has totally made landfall over the last 15 minutes. It continues to weaken, we think, from this point on, certainly as far as the winds go, but the locally heavy rain will be an issue as we go through the next 24 to 48 hours across the southern parts of Texas and eventually into southwest Texas. Now, those winds at their highest, we've had reports of over 70 miles an hour, even at the Port Mansfield area here with 76-mile-an-hour winds been reported. Port Isabel near South Padre Island here, 70-mile-an-hour winds were reported. And even in Brownsville, Texas, we had reports officially of 6 very heavy rain. Now, the heavy rain has been indicated by the darker greens, the yellows, and the reds. And you can see across the extreme southern tip, that's where the rain has been the heaviest so far. And even some stronger bands have been blowing out across the southwestern parts of Texas. So this is a huge rainmaker, you know. A tornado warning has just been issued, too, for Duval County and Jim Wells County, even northwestern Clayburgh County over the southern parts of Texas, because as with any tropical system making landfall, you have the friction and you have the increased threat of tornadic activity, and that is why there are tornado warnings again for Duval, Jim Wells, and Claiborne counties across the southwestern or the southern parts of the Lone Star State.
5 miles per hour, gusting to 105, moving slowly to the northwest at 8 miles per hour. To talk more about the impacts of Dolly here as it moves inland the next couple of days, Max, what are we seeing with this storm here with the rainfall problems?
Well, that's going to be the main concern here for the next day or so, and you can see on the radar there the track as it made landfall on South Padre Island this afternoon. If we zoom in here, you can see the eye very well defined, making landfall right there. North of Brownsville, south of Corpus Christi, and it's also interesting, you can see that really heavy thunderstorm activity is still on the southwest side of the eye. So the Harlingen area right in there is really getting some very, very heavy rain. Some amounts are going to be over a foot in some isolated areas, even up to 20 inches is what is forecast. And also there's always the threat here of some of the isolated tornadoes, even on these outer rain bands well away from that center. So it's not over yet. The rainfall, as a result of the rainfall, they've got flood watches and warnings up over South Texas here. And the one thing I can say here is the Hurricane Center, you know, every forecast they've made, even starting on Sunday morning, has targeted that South Texas area. Took a little jog there to the north, but still came in pretty much on forecast, you know, in the middle of the hurricane warning area. And also, it looks like it was probably a Category 2 hurricane, Category 1, borderline Category 2 at landfall. Lori?
All right, Max, thank you so much. We certainly know all too well what they're dealing with. We encourage you to stay with Local 10 for the very latest on Hurricane Dolly.
Moved well inland early in the afternoon. Now a tropical storm, but still some very heavy rain bands are going to be feeding in here. And right around that center of circulation, extreme South Texas getting some pretty prolific rain amounts as well. So flash flooding, a huge concern for this particular area. And Rich has more now on what we can expect from Dolly during the overnight and beyond.
Yeah, as we look at the latest on Dolly here again, now a tropical storm. It is weakening. Closer view, you can still see the circulation center, which is well off to the northwest of Brownsville, north of McAllen, and it will continue eventually crossing the Rio Grande as we go through tonight right into tomorrow. So really the flood threat will shift from Texas into the mountainous area of Mexico. And some of the rainfall amounts have been very high down toward areas just to the north of Brownsville over
Yesterday, I did get blown around a bit as I was trying to tape something when we were off the satellite. So here's a look at that.
All right, 3, 2, 1. It's about 11:30 right now, local time, and the eye wall is in force here on Padre Island. You can see winds gusting probably up in the 70-80 mile per hour range. Virtually everything is shut down, and we've actually encountered some accidents ourselves. The back window of our SUV just blew out.
There's my performance, guys.
It typically does. August and September is when things really get rolling. That's when the tropics really heat up. Now here is a satellite image that dates back to July the 1st. Notice July the 1st, and we're watching a little disturbance that moved off the coast of Africa. And this one survived and was actually named. Watch what happens as we put this 30-day satellite image into view. This ended up to be Bertha. Hurricane Bertha, then Tropical Storm Bertha, then Hurricane Bertha. Meanwhile, another one of these disturbances came across, developed into Hurricane Dolly. So it's a very active month for July. But August and September are even more active. Well, what do we have out here right now? Here's a look at our current July 31st satellite image. And it's very, very quiet out here. Just a weak tropical wave moving through the eastern Caribbean. Some showers up here toward Grenada and the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico. That would just about be it. Look at the Gulf of Mexico. Quiet. And then off the coast of Africa, we do have another little area of low pressure. It's opened up. It has weakened somewhat. So, quiet for July the 31st. Look at that, huh? Weak disturbance here along a trough of low pressure in the Gulf of Mexico will be monitored for the potential of development. It is unlikely at this point. If you have plans to the beach, the Gulf looks great. And the Caribbean also looks fine. Just that tropical wave moving from east to west, and even the Mexican Riviera on the other side. Pretty quiet out here.
Is located right around the central Caribbean Sea. But we are watching several areas out in the Atlantic, two of them, one that might become another tropical depression, but the one closer to home right over the Gulf of Mexico has become Tropical Depression number 5. And that's just south of the Mississippi River Valley right now. At this point, the system is still holding to maximum sustained winds at 35 miles per hour, moving west at 6 miles per hour. And the latest forecast cone is calling that the system might be upgraded sometime tomorrow into Tropical Storm Edouard as it continues to hover right around the Gulf Stream waters. There are watches and warnings in effect for the areas of the Mississippi River Valley and as well extending towards Port O'Connor.
Storm Edouard picks up steam.
Here we go. About an hour ago, new tropical storm warnings were issued. Meteorologist John Giraldi is tracking that storm. John, it does appear to be picking up steam.
Yes, it does. But the first thing we want to mention, it does not look like it's going to be a threat to South Florida, which is good news for us, but not for the Gulf Coast. Let me show you where it is right now. It's about 426 miles to the east of Galveston, Texas. Winds now up to 45 miles per hour and moving to the west at 6 miles per hour. We're going to zoom in to the northern Gulf of Mexico, and you can see it's getting a little bit better organized as we switch over to the satellite imagery. Now, the reconnaissance plane has been out there all afternoon, and they found a closed circulation right here at 5 o'clock, and they called it a tropical depression, number 5. And then about 15 minutes later, they found winds at about 45 miles per hour in this area. So then they bumped it up to a tropical storm, Edouard. Now, in terms of where is it going to be moving, it is going to continue to move towards the west over the next couple of days, probably ashore right around the Texas coast sometime during the morning on Tuesday as a strong tropical storm. So warnings are out right now for portions of the Louisiana coast, but they're going to get a lot of rain from this and, of course, gusty winds, but it will not be affecting us.
All right, it's coming up now on 50 past the hour. That does mean it's time for your tropical update. And I want to start out with the past 7 days here on our tropical update because it's very interesting to note how we saw the showers and thunderstorms persist here off the coast of Florida. And this is what eventually has now become Tropical Storm Edouard in the Gulf of Mexico. So here's a look at Tropical Storm Edouard. This is a look at the satellite imagery. And overnight, the system became a little more ragged. We lost some of the thunderstorm activity with it. But you can see just within the past couple of hours, we've seen a flare-up of new convection, and the pressures have actually come down again after rising a little bit in the middle of the night. With that said, winds are at 45 miles an hour, the movement off to the west at 8, and right now that is going to continue to be the forecasted movement, continuing to take it off to the west at about 8 miles an hour. Let's have a look at where we're thinking Edouard is going to go as we head into your day on Tuesday. Well, anyone anywhere from intercoastal city Louisiana to Port O'Connor, Texas, includes those of you in Houston and Lake Charles. You need to keep abreast of this weather maker because it is coming in your direction, and we shouldn't overemphasize exactly where the center crosses land. This will be one of those systems where certainly the impacts could be felt away from the center. No big surprise there. Whenever you get sometimes disorganized tropical storms or what we consider maybe a weak Category 1 hurricane, sometimes it's not right where the center crosses land. The impacts can be a little more broad brushed across the region.
It is getting stronger this afternoon, and Janine Anderson has more with our tropical update.
Thanks, Rob. Well, it looks like Tropical Storm Edouard continues its westward movement in the northern Gulf. And notice we've got a lot of convection associated with this storm. Right now, we have tropical storm warnings in effect from the mouth of the Mississippi westward to Port O'Connor, Texas. And notice some of the outer bands already affecting parts of the Louisiana coast. Now, here's a look at the latest advisory. The storm is about 270 miles to the east-southeast of Galveston, Texas. We've got 45-mile-an-hour winds with gusts up to 60, and the storm is moving west at 8 miles an hour. Now, here's a look at the track as we head into Tuesday evening. Should make landfall as a tropical storm and then continue its way inland early Wednesday morning as an area of low pressure. Now, 3 to 5 inches of rain is expected with this storm. Hopefully, the folks in Texas are getting prepared. Now, here's a look at our weather.
Edouard.
Well, Trent, if you look at that satellite loop, you'll see that it certainly has become more symmetric looking than we had this time last night. If we zoom in a little bit there, however, you look at the thunderstorm activity near the center of the storm, and it's just really not all that organized in there yet. The hurricane hunters have been out there all afternoon flying from Keystone Air Force Base in a pattern sort of like this, and they're really not finding any stronger winds. The maximum sustained winds are about 45 miles per hour. If we look at the radar, you can certainly see the well-defined circulation center here, and these rain bands are moving along the Louisiana coast. One thing that was significant from the aircraft, the wind field has expanded, and now it goes out about 70 miles from the center there. So as the storm moves westward towards that upper Texas coast, this is what we're going to see in about 12 hours. By about midday tomorrow, will be impacting that upper Texas coast. So they should be preparing for a Category 1 hurricane in the Galveston, Houston, and upper Texas coast area. Charles?
10 p.m. Central Daylight Advisory here. Top sustained winds, they ratcheted up just a little bit up to 60. It was 45 all day. And really on Monday, Edouard was really trying to organize, having a tough time of it. You had a couple different bursts of convection around that center of circulation, but the center generally stayed away from the heavy convection, and that's what needs to happen for tropical cyclone to develop. You need those heavy showers right around that center of circulation. All right, as we look at what we expect to happen here, we expect the Edouard to continue generally off to the west-northwest, eventually crossing land as it makes its way up toward the upper Texas coast. Satellite view, you can see for yourself. Just looking at the imagery here, it does not look that organized. What we'll have to watch is this big burst right here. See if that tries to wrap right around the center as we go through the overnight hours. That may allow for a little additional strengthening. Water vapor satellite imagery here. This helps us out a great deal. If you look at some of this orange color here, that's some dry air. And generally, you can see over toward the western Gulf of Mexico, we had some dry air, and that was really causing the system to deteriorate there. It was trying to fight that dry air, and if you get any of that entrained into the circulation, it will cause it not to develop quite as rapidly. That's what
is that the speed of motion of the system is fairly quick, 14 miles per hour, and we expect that track to continue, and that's going to basically cause the rain to last only a total of about 8 to 12 hours over the greater Houston area, and we don't think that's going to be continuous rain and extremely heavy rain. So, by the way, the 65-mile-per-hour winds, we're not seeing any of those sustained winds near the center of circulation now. So in the next advisory, we'll see those winds coming down a little bit, I'm pretty certain. We are still seeing some gusts, and those gusts will be highest in the rain bands. And we have seen some accumulations of rain, 4 inches or so to the southeast of Houston, north and east of Galveston in these bands. And some of these bands are producing some pretty heavy rain on the order of 1 inch to 1.5 inches an hour, and that's enough to cause some flooding along the roadways. If you're going into a freeway underpass that you know routinely floods, you may not want to go there today. It's going to be a blustery day out there. Some of the heaviest rain remains well offshore, and we think this part will never get there. In the meantime, off way to the west, you see some isolated thunderstorms on the edge of the periphery of this, and those rain bands could actually produce some severe thunderstorms. Dr. Forbes will be looking at the potential for tornadic activity later.
Made landfall right east of Port Arthur and Galveston earlier today, and it just dumped a lot of rain, didn't do a whole lot of damage, and thank goodness it didn't have time to intensify to anything stronger than a tropical storm. Here's the 11 a.m. advisory: 29.9 north, 94.6 west, maximum sustained winds of 60 miles per hour, moving west-northwest at 15 miles per hour. Pressure pressure 997 millibars and about 40 miles northeast of Houston, Texas at this hour. So that is on the move, and those folks have dodged a bullet because the system didn't intensify.
Storm station now tracking Tropical Storm Edouard as it made landfall in Texas earlier today. Not a hurricane as feared by some, but it still came with strong winds and all that heavy rain. Reporter Nicole Collins is live in Galveston near the area where Edouard made landfall just a few hours ago. Nicole?
Good morning, Christine. Even though Edouard did not morph into a hurricane and conditions could really be worse, authorities still stress caution. Tropical Storm Edouard made its way ashore along the North Texas coast between Sabine Pass and High Island early today. The city of Houston is breathing a sigh of relief after Edouard's center veered north and failed to reach hurricane status.
We wake up this morning to a changed situation, and while most of our area is celebrating the fact that the tropical storm, or Edouard, shifted to the north and east, it is still a dangerous situation for parts of our area.
The word from state and local officials, be careful.
This is still going to be an all-day significant event in terms of heavy rain and winds, and so if you can stay home, it's probably still a good idea to stay inside. I mean, it's not a day you'd normally venture out on, but obviously if you need to go to work, sure, but use good judgment. As the mayor said, we're still going to have localized flooding, so don't drive into the high water. Be careful where you go. Watch out for down power lines.
Forecasters say remnants of Edouard will remain in Texas throughout the week, bringing much needed rain to this very hot and dry state. Reporting live in Galveston, Texas, I'm Nicole Collins. Christine, back to you.
A sigh of relief as Edouard skirts the state when making landfall this morning, but it did put a damper on tourist beach plans in the Lone Star State. Let's take a look. Tropical Storm Edouard made landfall east of Galveston, stirring the surf and dumping heavy rain along the coast. Residents of low-lying areas who were ordered to evacuate yesterday will be able to return home later today. Edouard's gusty winds blowing around trees, but it never made it to hurricane status, which is 74 miles an hour. The storm is weakening as it heads further inland and moves past Houston toward the central part of the state now. Some areas, though, did see gusts topping 65 miles per hour. Wind sent one chair flying in High Island Beach, nearly hitting a Fox News reporter covering the storm. Port Arthur also getting some powerful gusts, causing a traffic light to dangle over a busy intersection. Overall, though, few residents lost power because of the storm, and again, no major damage has been reported so far.
Very minimal flooding. We had intermittent couple of power outages that didn't last very long at all. So I think all in all, we were very fortunate to have not had the brunt of the storm hit us.
So there you have it, a lucky break for the Lone Star State. Forecasters say Edouard is expected to weaken further into a tropical depression by tomorrow morning. Live in the Plex, Diane Fernandez, 7 News.
All right, question is, what is next for this storm as the system moves through? Chief Meteorologist Phil Farrow in the storm station with the answer, and of course, our local weather. Phil?
Well, just heard it. It is weakening ever so rapidly, making landfall early this morning right between Louisiana and Texas right here. Some of the outer bands still causing some rainfall, which they need. They've already gotten some areas around Houston about 2 to 3 inches of rain, and they can expect a little more. 3 to 5 inches of rain won't be out of the question. Possibility of some isolated tornadoes, and at times they could get some gusty winds as the feeder bands come onshore. But by tomorrow afternoon, we can say goodbye to that.
Like taking caffeinated coffee and mixing it with decaf. A lot of decaf. That's what's happening tonight. The decaf, of course, being the hot air. And you can see what's happening. This is a 12-hour loop of Edouard moving inland, just kind of falling apart here. All the rain bands have pretty much gone by the wayside here. But what's interesting is even though we've chopped away or decaffeinated our caffeine here a little bit, we have also unleashed warm, moist air now across eastern Texas. So as we go through the day tomorrow, we're going to have some showers and thunderstorms in through here. In some places that may not have had much of all from Edouard. Still a 35-mile-an-hour depression, if you want to call it that. You know, it's pretty much potentially a rainmaker tonight, but we don't expect any type of flash flooding whatsoever from it unless it stops and that'll be something we'll keep an eye on overnight. A little cluster of thunderstorms here over Florida. They're moving through Tampa, St. Pete tonight, actually moving westbound, so they are heading to the beaches. Keep an eye on those, mariners. And what we have is, once again, the makings of another upper tropospheric low trying to cut itself off over Cuba and the Bahamas, and that is creating the shear. The southwest winds aloft on the south side, winds out of the northeast. You can see the cloud debris going southwest over Florida, and that's because of the upper air wind flow at the present time. This wave got sheared off quite nicely. Pretty robust wave at that coming into the islands. We've had a couple of these now, but they really haven't done much once they've gotten through the islands. It's because their timing has been with that upper tropospheric low, and that has not allowed for much to happen whatsoever. Look at these fronts charging southeast. This is an interesting trend because we will see this again early next week with this new trough coming in. We'll watch another deep trough and cold front come off the east coast, and that should juice up the wind flow. We look across the Atlantic basin and through here, and we've seen another cluster of showers and thunderstorms break off from the monsoon trough, and this is just going to kind of roll across the intertropical inversion zone. No immediate signs of development coming up and through here. Across Africa, obviously, we've got several waves to watch, 3 of note. You can see the big one in Central Africa, and that does come off the coast as per some of the model forecasts. But